Survivor specialist Phil and Alexa are back with our second episode of Winning Survivor. Once again, joined by Once Upon an Island. Go check out his YouTube channel. He's given the thumbs up already. He's ready to go. He's got the solar system behind him, in case anybody was wondering.
Oh, I know.
But we're back. Our solar system for the evening is going to be Thailand to All Stars. That's what we're looking at tonight on Winning Survivor. If you haven't checked out our first episode yet, where we talk all about Richard, Tina, Ethan, and Vesepia, go check it out. I made the claim that Vesepia was the best winner out of that first bunch, and I'm going to make the claim that this is actually going to be a pretty crazy opinion here, but I'm going to make the claim that this is the most unpredictable group of winners ever, and Thailand is not the worst season of this bunch. Those are my two big, broad jumps here. I just rewatched Thailand. It is so much better than All Stars, but that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about, though, these winners. I'm not going to let either of you even attack me for that, because I know the internet's going to attack me for that.
I don't think those are crazy takes at all. This is a really weird group of winners. Like, all you need to do is throw like Bob and Fabio in. Like, past that, really weird group of people. And All Stars is universally hated, but so is Thailand. So I guess we can break down that part.
Yeah, we'll talk all about that.
My hot take is that Brian isn't as great of a winner as everyone thinks he is, and I'm glad we're going to talk about him first.
And my hot take is I'm muting Once Upon an Island. He can't unmute himself for the rest of the podcast. So Once Upon an Island has been.
I got you.
I've got like the around the horn thing going here, where I can mute you just when I feel like muting you, and you just lost 3 points because that's what I said. I got a lot to say about Brian.
Tag team, I'll unmute you. We'll
yeah, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep this going, but I have a lot that we're going to say about Brian. But I do think that if you're looking at this, we'll get to like the Gabon, Tocantins, Samoa, Heroes versus Villains era, which is probably the second most unpredictable podcast we're going to do. But in terms of 4 winners, if I were to tell you before you sat down to watch each of these seasons that these were the 4 winners of each of the seasons, you would not believe me even as you sat and watched the seasons. And I think that's what's so fascinating about this era of Survivor. I know a lot of people talk all the time about how Survivor is too predictable now. We could tell Nick's going to win from here. We could tell Tommy's going to win from here. It's become a little too easy to predict. And I thought that that's how it always was. There's always been winners at it, but rewatching these 4 seasons really tells you in the first 8 seasons of Survivor, the only winner that we should have seen coming from a mile and a half away is Richard Hatch. The rest of them, not easy to figure out in these first 8 seasons. And especially here, 5 through 8, I think it's a very difficult group, even when you know the winner, to be like, why is it that they win this season and what is their overall story? So that's what we're going to be here to break down. And now I've talked for pretty much 3 minutes, so I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Wow, Phil. Yeah, you did a good job there. I think that's something that's going to be really cool to discuss, especially as we get to the 30s. And it's not so much like demographically everyone is the same in the 30s, but in the 30s, a very specific type of gameplay does really well. Jenna Morasca and Sandra 1.0 and Amber and pretty much anybody from the beginning not named Richard Hatch, I don't really know how that game wins season 41 or season 42. So that's what's so cool about this. And here with Jenna, I think at the time and possibly always, Jenna was the youngest winner. She was 21 years old winning Survivor. Could you imagine being 21 and winning Survivor? I can't.
The only other 21-year-old who ended up
Fabio?
Well, no. Okay, so Fabio won at the age of 21, but he wasn't the youngest person on his season. He's the youngest person to ever win, but wasn't the youngest player on his season. The only other person to be the youngest person on their season and also be 21 when they won was Aris, because that was before teenagers started playing. So Aris is only 21 in Panama, believe it or not. That's pretty insane.
He acts like he's mid-20s. I was going to say 30, but like him and Terry. We'll get to that. But anyways, just really like very different kind of gameplay wins this group of 4 right here. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And Wes, what do you think about all that?
I'm sorry, what are we talking about? Thailand?
Well, we haven't really gotten to Thailand yet. We're doing more of an overview first, and then we'll hit Thailand.
Yeah, this group of 4 winners, I think, is a very unique group of winners. I think all the winners here, especially in these first 10 to 20 seasons, are all very unique. feel like we start getting a little samey in the 30s, like we were saying. It seems like what the jury values gets more consistent maybe later versus here in the early seasons where it's like a jury can value different things, you know, especially here in Thailand, just starting off in Thailand, like what the jury values is how Brian wins, and Brian squeaks out a win over Clay because of that. I don't know if you want to just jump into Thailand, but I feel like that's really why we have such a unique cast of winners, and it's why it's going from Brian all the way to Amber. Like the jury is why we have the winner we have, even if we don't think that was the best player of the season. Like even if we think Rob is better than Amber, was he? You know, that's something we're going to talk about tonight. And I think it's something people still debate to this day, and we even saw in Winners at War. So it's not a closed book on it at all.
And I think that's what's so interesting about Brian to dive into Thailand. People say his win is so dominant, and it was. And yes, he only wanted 4 votes, and that's all he needed to beat Clay. But we were a potential wrong turn away from Jan winning that season.
Would that have been a wrong turn, Alexa? Let me ask you this.
That would have been what I wanted.
Yeah, that would have maybe been a right turn. I mean, that would have been our first heavy drinking first grade teacher to ever win Survivor. And that would have my favorite part of Survivor Thailand is at the reunion. Jeff says, and of course, here's Jan. Where else would her family and friends be other than at a bar watching the Survivor reunion? And it's just like all of them hammered at the bar. It's amazing. I absolutely love it.
And now I really want to rewrite history. That would have been such a good arc because Jan at the beginning ends up she and who is it? She and Jake.
It's Jake.
And Jake, because they're the 2 oldest people on the season, they end up picking the tribes, and Jan picks this like ragtag group of people. And man, if she won, God, think of that story. Think of what the people would be writing about here in 2020.
Absolutely. She would have had to have been on Winners at War as like 73-year-old Jan. It would have had to. I love how Wes is just like, no, absolutely.
No.
Also, I need to correct my Aris statement because I'm getting ripped. Aris wasn't 21. He was just the youngest player.
I think he was 24, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's what he was. So, I know everybody's talking about the reflection in your glasses here. So
I'm turning down the brightness on my screen so that's less of an issue. I can't go glasses-less because I am pretty blind. But
no, it's totally fine. I just saw it over in the chat. I'm like, oh my gosh. Now, if you're looking at any, you're going to be like, oh, I know everything about Survivor, and it's just going to be people are going to be able to read the reflection.
They're like, oh, he's looking at the Survivor wiki. I got to double check myself, you guys.
So I have the Jenna Morasca Survivor wiki ready to go right now, and I
don't want to say Brian won 5-2. No, he actually won 4-3. Ah, crap. So I got to double check myself.
What's about to happen right here is we're about to get in like a 25-ish minute argument, Wes, you and I, about how great at Survivor Brian Heidik is. And here's what I'm going to say, and Alexa's shaking her head, and I just think that's anybody. So here's the thing. Brian Heidik legitimately does not have the same feelings as other people have. He just doesn't have. And that's why he's the most perfect Survivor player. Like if you were building a Survivor player, you said, you know how like everybody always wants to say, who's the best winner? He's not the best winner. So I don't think that. I know
Everyone
Alexa,
put down your guns.
Yeah, Alexa, you have my top 100 list in front of you. So I know you know where I put Brian. But the thing with Brian Heidik is there is no emotion. He is full of shit the entire time. He lied to production before the game even started. He's a used car salesman. Oh, great. Okay, that'll be fun. We'll put him on as a used car salesman who also just happened to have done softcore porn and also met his wife doing softcore. And like, it's
so upsetting that his lower third was not softcore.
It should have said Dave Roth. That's what it should have said. It should have said his porn name. Because it's on the Survivor wiki, which I have open. But so what I'm saying is
be Googling for a friend real quick.
But what I'm saying is Brian is unlike, so we always ask this one to each other. Can this type of game win? Absolutely not. This game can never win again because the only reason he won is because he put things into the air that only a person like Brian would not mind putting into the air. And also The most fascinating part is at final 6 is when he won the game because Clay got mad and Clay got angry and Brian didn't. And everybody sits there and is like, Brian's such a class act. He's such a great guy. He's such a nice guy. He's so great. And he's really not. But that's what I think is so amazing about his gameplay is that he was able to convince 4 people and would have convinced more, but they actually thought Clay just answered the questions better. I mean, the Penny performance when Brian has to defend his answer to Penny, it's one of the most pathetic final tribal council performances of all time. Maybe the worst moment ever. But he wins at 4-3, probably in most cases loses to Clay, but he put enough things into the air that are possibly despicable and disgusting, but I'm all about it. He won Survivor. He absolutely won Survivor. So what do you got here, Wes? What do you got to shoot down the Iceman, Mr. Freeze, middle finger to all of America, Brian Heidig?
So first off, I think Brian has a lot of good things that he did. I just think that the argument that Brian's one of the best winners is not a great one. I feel like Brian, it's such a disservice the edit I feel like gave him, despite how much stuff we saw about him, because we kept hearing how much people trust Brian, how much they like Brian, how Brian's a stand-up guy. But even if you remove the confessionals of Brian, like I never really got the sense that Brian was like this stand-up guy. So I'm not sure. Maybe it was in comparison to Clay, he was a stand-up guy, or maybe in comparison to the Ted incident, he was a stand-up guy. But I don't understand how Brian is viewed as this stand-up guy by people. And I feel like maybe it's because the edit didn't show us times when he seemed like he was a stand-up guy. Maybe it's because he was so emotionless. You never saw him get angry. Maybe things like that. I'm not sure what exactly they were seeing that made him such a stand-up guy. I mean, I just didn't see it, even if you remove his confessionals where he's clearly like in confessionals being a jerk. But he did. He played such a great – he had people like under his mind control. But if you look at like how the final votes pan out, if you look at how the jury talks to him at the end, it's clear that while he had basically control of Chewy gone, Sukjai was not at all impressed by Brian. And the fact that most of them gave votes to Clay just goes to show you like how bad of a Brian did in his social game, at least in the second half of the game, because there's no way Clay should have got anything more than like Penny's vote. But yet he did. He got 3 votes. And Clay is a GOAT. I made a whole video about it called the GOAT strategy, because while people had always been like, who's the easiest person to bring to the end? Like Giuseppe is like, I know I could have a better chance being Nalia than Kathy. She didn't bring Nalia to the end. So Brian's the first person we're like, I'm going to drag this person to the end, but he never tells us he's going to do that. Mm-hmm. Actually, the only way the show even tells us that he's doing that is because Jan says, you know why he's best friends with Clay? It's because he knows he can beat him. And I'm paraphrasing here a little bit.
Because she's a strategic genius.
Brian never says that's what he's doing. But if you look at how he treats Ted, and then the moment Clay's like, why don't you and I be a final 2? And Brian's like, yeah, you know what? I'll do that. That's it. Like that's how if you just look at it like almost like factual, like that was the moment where Brian's like, I'm bringing Clay to the end. Because I think he thought originally Ted was his GOAT. I don't know. And then he realized Clay's a bigger GOAT, but he never tells us that. So it's like so hard to tell what was Brian thinking. I feel like somehow didn't tell us enough while telling us a lot, you know.
I think when it comes to the stand-up guy comments, I think one, he was an asshole to us, the viewers, but to the players, he really wasn't. What he did is he kind of was just like, oh, you know, I'm all love. I think in their very first tribal council, he says something like, as I always like to say, like love not war. And I'm like, who are you? What are you doing saying that? And so I think he's preaching all this lovey-dovey stuff. And what he does is he does kind of like Tommy Sheehan does the Brian, where he says he's going to be everyone's number one. And you'll see the only time he's really gossiping or throwing someone else under the bus is when he's only with one other person. So it's kind of like that kindred spirit of like, oh, the two of us like hate someone together. Yeah. But I will never say that he's not a stand-up guy because that's what everyone else is saying. So that whole process, it's incredibly impressive and it's incredibly messed up. But to your point, Phil, he is the only person who could do that. And people say that Sarah did that. No. Sarah's relationships are extremely real. Mm-hmm. Those are true friendships. Yeah. Brian didn't give a crap about any of these people. He didn't know Sheehan's name.
Like, yeah, he didn't know Shien's name. He literally couldn't get it right. He kept, what do you call her, Suji or something like that.
So funny because the day before,
he was talking to her forever.
The day before, he tells her, like, we all love you. Like, no, you don't. You.
Well, but this is why I will always defend. And I forget exactly where I have, and I won't say it because obviously, like, I don't want to give away our little my little list there. But I will always defend Brian as a great winner because, again, nobody else can do it. And people in the chat are trying to say, who is he? Who can we compare him to? He's not Tommy. He's not Tommy at all because Tommy, I've gone out and had beers with in New York. I don't think I'm going to have beers with Brian in New York, even if he asked me.
What would you talk about?
I have no idea, Coyotes. I mean, maybe. I really don't know. But what I think is so fascinating about Brian and his game is we're hearing he's a stand-up guy, and listen to what he does. And I wish we could play the clips, but what Brian does is absolutely brilliant. And this is it. Chewy has 5. Now, first of all, Chewy eliminates 7 Sukjai members in a row. Unbelievably impressive. Something that does not get credit in the Survivor community because it's Chewy and because it's one of the most despicable alliances. We don't like any of them. We don't like Helen. We don't like Ted. We don't like Clay.
We like Helen. I think we like Helen.
Yeah. What's wrong with
No way. No. Rewatch the reunion of Survivor Thailand. We do not like Helen.
Well, who's we? Who's
we?
Okay. When was last time? Okay. I'm just asking this, and I'm not trying to like
start it. Reunion 2 months ago. No, but who is we? Do the players not like her? Like, who are you saying is we?
I don't think the players liked her as much.
Oh, the players didn't like her, but fans.
I think the fans liked her, but mainly because there was nobody else to root for. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's fine, but I'm saying, like, it wasn't like we were sitting there like everybody was rooting for Colby, or rooting for, in season 3, everybody's rooting for Ethan or rooting for Lex or whoever. Like, you weren't like Helen goes and you're like, okay. Like you don't feel like that gut wrench. Oh, this is like so brutal. But even if we do like her, what I'm saying is the Chewy 5 is so unlikable. Like, as a whole, they're just an unlikable alliance. But what Brian did, again, that was so unbelievable. And it's really disgusting. So I'm prefacing it with that, but I still don't think that the person you are takes away from the way you play Survivor, or like how good you are at the game. He sat there and he made nonstop chauvinistic comments, nonstop, to Clay and to Ted. Why? Because Clay and Ted are pretty damn chauvinistic. And Brian built up his fan base there. It's the same thing. You don't tell, jokes to you have to know your audience.
Yes.
You don't tell certain jokes to one audience that you'll tell to another, but then you'll tell these others to that other audience that the other audience would find absolutely despicable. And Brian told the chauvinistic jokes to them. And then he turns around and he goes to Helen and Jan and he says, how disgusting is Clay? Like, Clay's just the worst. He's like, I don't like him. I don't like Ted. And what he did was he positioned himself in the middle and put boys against girls. And he was able to, in his own alliance, whenever the girls said, we got to get rid of Clay, it was, we have to get rid of Clay. Can we convince Brian? Probably not, but we have to weaken Clay, or we have to get rid of Clay, which will weaken Brian. We don't think Brian's going to vote us out. He convinced everybody that he was really with them when he never was, and always, as you said, Wes, had the intention of bringing bringing Clay to the end with him, despite never telling us. So I think it's a really fascinating strategy that he executed to absolute perfection. And if you look at who the votes he gets at Final Tribal, he gets everybody from Chewy because they hated Clay because he pitted everybody against Clay. Yeah. And he gets Jake's because Jake wasn't a woman. Like, at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. He could not tell Penny where she was from, if she had older brothers, anything about her. So it's really fascinating what Brian did.
I think one big misstep that he made in that strategy, all of that was perfect. The misstep that he made that could have been catastrophic is he made whatever comment to Ken that put Ken off so much that Ken couldn't even talk about it.
I wish Ken would have said whatever it was. And I know we've heard afterwards supposedly what it was, but he didn't say it in the show. And I wonder if he did say it, if it would have made all the difference in terms of.
What was the rumor on this? Because I was trying to figure it out, and I obviously this is just speculation, but what was the rumor on this?
To put like 50 asterisks. The rumor is that it was a disparaging comment about Ted.
Mm-hmm.
And
in terms of race.
if we're going to make assumptions that not assumptions, if we use blatantly chauvinistic about women, we can make the assumption as to what realm he was talking about when it comes to Ted. And so to me, this shows hundreds of lapses in judgment, but he chose to make a comment like that to the New York City firefighter or the New York City police officer.
The guy is high on his morals.
Like the Captain America of the season, who I'm sure should have been such a bigger deal in the season, but ends up not being. So I think he almost gets too carried away. But again, it's a conversation that we never actually see. I feel like we never see them talk at all.
And I wonder if they even got it on camera, honestly.
I don't think they did. And I think that's one of the reasons why we don't actually know, because I think if they would have gotten it on camera based on the fact that it was Ken's only question and that it was so integral, because you got to remember too, and this is what I was kind of talking about and alluding to, we don't like Helen because of the reunion, but this is what I was alluding to is we get that question from Ken to Brian. Why did Ted have to go? And we know it's a race thing. And then Ted comes up and Ted says, Clay, what did you say racist about me? And that's his question at Final Tribal. Now, at the reunion, Ted says, Helen told me that Clay said something racist, and I've approached Clay on it, and it didn't happen, and blah, blah, blah. And that's why it's well, what was Helen doing? And we know Helen was very angry at the end. So was Helen saying something? But then, as time has progressed, there's actually rumors that Brian threw it out there that Clay said something disparaging about race, and that he's the one who put it into Helen's ear, who then put it into Ted's ear, and it's solidified that Brian was going to get all three of those votes, despite the fact that Brian might have been the one who said something incredibly disparaging.
What a hot mess of an alliance.
Thailand is an absolute disaster. But again, and do I do I want to hang out with Brian Heidik? No, I do not want to hang out with Brian Heidik. I don't want to go get a beer with him. But I just think the way he looked at this game and was able to literally remove any emotion. He's the only winner who doesn't cry. To remove any emotion from the game, not even laugh or smile or anything. He doesn't even make eye contact with Jeff Probst when he wins a challenge.
He does a lot of looking down.
He'll be like, oh, thank you. And he just walks away. It's so bizarre. And I think it's fascinating, and you can't knock the guy's gameplay. You can knock him as a human a million different ways, but you cannot knock his gameplay. And
he has he has a bunch of moments of I get social awkwardness, whatever word you want to use. They win some reward and he gets drunk, and the next day he's like, I can never lose control like that again. And he was doing nothing wrong.
And he was when he was drunk though, he was telling Ted some things. Ted's like, I'm impressed he's still able to think so strategically. And then Brian the next morning tried to play it off even though I was drunk, I was still thinking about how it can be strategical. And
exactly.
So it was all planned, but it really
any other person, that's not a huge deal. But for him, it's oh my God, I couldn't control it. And then my favorite is when it's the family visit and he sees his I guess now ex-wife, and he is not happy, not having it at all. And she's not having it either, because that poor thing has to do the gross food eating challenge.
Well, and you got to remember too, the thing about Brian as well, speaking of the family visit, in Thailand, there were actually 3 different family style visit things.
Were a lot.
And there was the one reward where Brian won the video with his wife, and she went all around their mansion to their grand piano, their brand new cars, all that. And Brian was pissed about that because he thought the reward was just going to be him. And I'm pretty sure that's why production doesn't do these groups watching anymore, is because Brian was like, I haven't told these people a thing about me. Why should you be able to blow up my game like this despite me not doing anything? And I think that's kind of why we don't really see, even Jeff will be like, Will, do you want to say that you're a high school student? Do you want to announce that to people? You Michael Yerger, how old do you want to say you are? I think that's why we see that more now, because Brian was like, this is production making it so that I might have a hard time winning. And he didn't even smile during his wife's video. He was just like, oh shit, I need to somehow play this off so that they don't think I'm just this rich guy with the super hot wife who's doesn't need $1 million.
To be fair, if Brian had actually watched Survivor before he went on Survivor, he would have seen the times they have the tape, and that everyone sees your tape. There's no like one-on-one tape time. It's always everyone sees the tape.
What about in season, was it 3? Everybody saw a little piece of the tape, but I think when the person won, I think they saw their whole tape by themselves.
No, Lex won that challenge, and him and Tom got to go on like some adventure where they saw a lion eat
that's right,
a gazelle or something like that.
That's right.
They didn't get to watch. They didn't watch the whole tape. Everyone got to watch everyone's whatever part, however much of the tape there was. Everyone saw all the tape, and then in Borneo, everyone saw all the tape. So Brian screwed up because Brian, had he known his stuff, would have known that if he wins this challenge, everyone's gonna see the tape. It's just not like there's precedent for this. Brian wasn't. He didn't have to trailblaze it. He should have known. And the fact that he didn't is on him. This isn't new. The production doing.
Was he a Survivor fan? Like, did he watch?
I don't think he was.
That's what I'm saying. I know there's no way he was.
Impressive. I will give him that.
Yeah, but I don't think he was a fan. I think he just was like, oh, cool opportunity to win $1 million. Sure, sounds good. Probably.
Yeah, and it was really popular at the time, so like everyone probably heard of it, even if they hadn't watched it.
Yeah,
but, I mean that's on him to not know that. Like. There was a precedent, and it had been. We're going into season 5. I'm not expecting him to know Marquesas, but I don't think in Marquesas they had the tapes. I don't recall.
No, Marquesas, the families came out. That was the first time the families actually came out. I hope people who are listening to this, who are doing our trivia game, are listening to all these firsts and stuff. But yeah, I look, I hear it either way. I mean, I just don't think Brian was a fan of the show, which also, like Alexa said, like kind of makes it a little bit more impressive because he was literally able to just be like, this is going to be my line. So this is what I'm going to do. And that's what he did. And
I think people who don't like we'll talk about Earl like famously didn't watch Survivor. I think you really don't see it much anymore. And the more we talk about it, it seems like you don't see much at all. I think people who win Survivor without knowing much, if not anything about it, makes someone incredibly impressive. So I have to give him that. And now I'm going to go on mute.
Yeah. I think Brian's, what he does so well is that he's able to think like in terms of this is a game, which is where he's ahead of a lot of people in the first 5, the other 4 seasons and in this season. He's just so far ahead on that level. Like he's thinking this is a game. We saw a lot of that from Vesepia. But Brian, I think, embodies like this is simply a game, and that's all I care about is winning the game. It's almost like playing a game of sorry, and he's okay with saying sorry, but he's not really sorry. Yeah. But where Brian lacks is Brian's social game outside of the Chewy Gone alliance he was in. It almost makes me think of like Russell. Like Russell, I can't remember the exact day in Samoa, but if Russell doesn't crack around day 33, 34, I want to say, and start like berating people and treating people like trash on the way out the door, Russell almost pulls off like what Brian actually did, which was be a jerk in confessionals, but then like have everyone think you're an okay guy, like you're a good guy. Russell pulled the whole Katrina thing. No one knew that was fake during the season. And so I almost feel like, Brian did what Russell couldn't, but Brian did it before Russell, so Russell wasn't even like a thing. But
yeah,
what Russell was lacking was what Brian pulled off, which was at no point in 39 days did Brian crack and give away the fact that he's actually not caring and he's a jerk, which is impressive, by the way. That's a long time to go, especially on low food.
And people always say, like in interviews, people always say, you can't fake yourself for a week,
Brian
especially without food. And Brian did it without anything.
Well, and even his confessionals, because like as I was rewatching this season for this podcast, I was like, I haven't rewatched Thailand in years. I mean, it's probably been 6-7 years since I've rewatched Thailand, and I'm sitting down and I'm watching at the beginning. I'm like, Brian's really not in this. Like, where is Brian? Like, what's going on here? It was a lot about Ted. Ted's a great confessional giver. Clay's a very underrated character. I really do believe that. Like, he's a very fun early season character because you still don't like him, but he's funny and he says just stupid stuff and he's lazy and he's like everything you don't want. He's like the bad version of Sean Rector, but it's like watching a car crash. Like you're gonna watch it happen. And so like, I don't know. Like I think when I'm watching this, like Brian is so in the background on things, and then his coming out is really at the merge. that's when it
The fake
turns.
merge.
The fake merge. Yes. At Final 10, that's when his game completely changes because he starts talking to Jake, he starts talking to Ken, and he starts talking to Sheehan. He didn't talk to Aaron and he didn't talk to Penny one time as far as I'm concerned. But he started talking to them and he started saying to them, like, what can we do? Because he started looking at his own alliance as, well, they're going to have to do what I say. So now how can I make sure that these other people, like, we're not going to lose the numbers here. And he did that work. Now, granted, he was helped out by production because Sheehan goes home and Aaron goes home before they even merge. Yeah. But the only person Brian really talked to from that whole group was Jake. That's all he needed.
That's the only vote he got from.
And that's all he needed, though.
I for anyone who may not know, we're talking about with the fake merge. At Final 10, Jeff tells them it's gonna be two tribes. You guys are gonna be two tribes living on one beach. It's day 19. There's precedent from the past 4 seasons that this is the merge. There's no reason for them to think anything different in terms of assumptions. Though Jeff all season has been saying do not assume, but I think it was like a really terrible. The whole do not assume thing I think is really terrible. But anyway, so he tells them like you guys are now two tribes living on one beach. He doesn't give them any new buffs. He doesn't say you're merged. But they all assume they're merged. Mm-hmm. So Sheehan acts as if they're merged, as everyone else does. But Sheehan was clearly the one who was ready to flip from there because they had a 5-5 tie going into the fake merge. And she thought, oh, I'm going to make this 6-4. And, worst case scenario, Sheehan ends up at 6th. But they get to the immunity challenge, and Aaron's like, oh, yeah, the merge went really great. And Jeff's like, merge? I never started merge. Mm-hmm. He's laughing maniacally in his head.
He's so annoying.
This was the first season where he really became like, and I love Jeff, but this is where he really became a reality TV host. Yeah, this was the first season.
This season.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that he really hated every single one of the 16 individuals on.
I think
he hated all of them.
Are we just guessing he hates everyone? Because I keep hearing it, but is there proof?
There's first.
I feel like the attack zone challenge is like proof that he hates this whole season.
Yeah. The attack zone challenge is one huge thing. Yeah. That reunion, the only one I think he likes is John Raymond. I really do believe that might be the only person he likes on this whole season because he rips on Stephanie, he rips on Jed, he rips on everybody from Chewy in the final 5. It's really crazy. Like Jeff just does not like this group, and he has said in numerous different interviews and stuff that Thailand is his least favorite season, that he hated everything about it at the time and he hates it now.
Yeah, in the finale, he asks a question that's pretty much like, Brian, do you feel bad about being a horrible person? Like it's something just like crazy like that.
That is so forward because I know we haven't gotten to the Amazon yet, but the beginning of the Amazon reunion, he's like, how did a spoiled, selfish swimsuit model win the game and get 6 votes?
Leave her alone.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
Let's get to the China finale.
Yeah. Also, Jeff, like, why don't we chill with that and like not hate Jenna because she beat Matt, who I guess you liked more. But also, my favorite Jeff moment does come at the Thailand reunion, and it's my favorite Jeff moment of all time. He's literally talking to Erin about her boobs. Thank you, Alexa. Yeah. He's literally talking to Erin, and she keeps saying like, yeah, I wanted to prove I wasn't just the girl with the big boobs, and I wanted to prove everything. And she goes, I wanted to prove that I was really smart. And Jeff goes, yeah, and that you're the girl with the big boobs. And I'm like, what the hell did I just watch? Like, what just happened? So
poor Erin, candidly, I mean, like, because of circumstances, she's very forgetful. But I mean, she was probably cast for that reason, but she was trying to play. And the poor girl is like, give me a bone. And Jeff's like,
playing more than Sarah from Marquesas was, who was cast.
Yeah.
She was boob girl. Yeah. I know. I forgot about that. That was what there's some like great / terrible Jeff moments.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, there you go. That's really Brian. I mean, I've said it numerous times. I don't think this game could win ever again, but what do the two of you think?
No, I think I don't think Brian could ever come back on and win again. But if we're talking about if somebody else could adapt his game and do it again, the fact is that Brian, anyone who listened to Rob's podcast past week may have heard Tom Westman's interview, and he says that he told Russell to his face because Russell came up to him and said, am I the greatest player ever? To Tom Westman, Russell's asking this after Heroes vs. Villains. Am I the greatest player ever? And Tom said, no, you have 2 legs of a 3-legged stool. Mm-hmm. And, you're completely missing the social game. And I feel like Brian, he's not missing the 3rd leg completely, but it's like maybe it's like chopped in half. Like it would really need to be shored up about caring for people, because I feel like people would recognize how disingenuous he is. I really do. Or if someone was to do exactly what he did with like the same no emotions, I'm not sure how far that could get you, because I don't know. He was in a very good cast and a very good tribe for getting away with what he got away with. I don't know if it could be done again the same way. It would definitely have to be, I don't know. But the fact that he thought of it as a game, that portion, definitely. I mean, it's
fascinating.
How most people approach it now. And I think that's why people are like, Brian's one of the best winners, because he was already thinking about this. It's just a game, just like Richard, but it was like Richard without the emotions. It's just a game. It's just a game. It's just a game. I'm just playing a board game, and you guys are all pieces. That part he was way ahead on, but his social game was already lacking even in season 5, in my opinion. So I don't think this game could hold up again.
I think if someone ever did this game again, they would have to do a much better version of it, because I think it was very successful, but I think the way the game has evolved, it would have to be because like you both said, the cutthroat, the like playing just a game, like we'll get to Rob Cesternino in a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's like people are all about that. But
I mean, Heidick did receive
so bad,
but
he was so bad at making eye contact. Phil, like you said, he was so bad at being compassionate, like you said, Wes, and that just doesn't fly anymore.
Yeah,
he did receive 0 votes, but he's only eligible. Like Michelle Fitzgerald, by the way, who I remember getting ripped on for only going to 6 tribals, where she was like really eligible. Brian was only eligible at 6 and got 0 votes as well.
Yeah.
So and Michelle has an unfair comparison when people make that comparison.
Well, I also don't think that's like, I always look at it like as a whole. I don't think that type of stuff really matters all that much. Yeah. I really just look at like same thing I said, like, I don't care if you win 4-3 or 7-0. Jenna Morasca is not a better winner than Brian, because Brian only beat Clay 4-3 and Jenna won 6-1 over Matt. I don't believe that she's a better winner. So I don't think that matters so much. I think it really is like, did you execute? It's the same thing when Alexa and I try to do our MVP every week. Did you execute what you wanted to execute the way that you wanted to do it? Like, did it work? And if it worked, what more can you ask for? Yeah.
And Jenna's also, I mean, I guess now we can transition. Yeah. Jenna's the first blowout that we get. Like, smokes him.
Oh, are we completely done with Thailand?
I've not seen that yet.
Thailand officially.
Do you want to stay on Thailand? I know you love Thailand.
We're 37 minutes in, which is wild.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think the biggest problem with Thailand is that production tried getting too cheeky, just like as an overall for the season. They made them pick their own tribes, which I think every time they do is a big mistake. Even though it works out in Palau, it's just not the greatest decision every time. I think Palau, they pick their own tribes, right?
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Okay, yeah. But it's like every time they do it, it's like something disastrous or should be disastrous happens. And it's like they almost didn't learn their lesson from the season later ones. But I think that, and then the fake merge, it makes for a great one episode, but it ruins the rest of the season in terms of like, if you're just watching it for like the week-to-week stuff, you're like, oh, I know what's going to happen next already. Like, I already know what's going to happen. It's so predictable. And I actually went back and read Dalton Ross's articles from Thailand when Thailand was airing and like reading. He already knew, like, and Dalton Ross doesn't read the edit. He's just like, he already knows Brian's going to win. Like, it was like weeks and weeks before Brian won. It's like, this is so predictable and boring. Brian's going to win. It's like, man, it must have been rough back then for people writing the show.
The Survivor podcasting community.
Yeah, exactly.
Podcast community.
It really is the only season where evil wins. It's the only season I really believe, like, because
heroes versus villains.
Yeah, well, come on. Yeah, I know. Sandra's a villain, but Brian Heidick should have been first pick for villains because he's the ultimate villain. So, but yeah, let's go on to Jenna in the Amazon and talk about Jenna Morasca, and one that, again, I've been rewatching all the seasons like as we do this because we're in lockdown still pretty much. Like, I mean, we're not, but we are. So what else am I going to do? I can watch 13 episodes or 40, 52 episodes in a week. But rewatching the Amazon, I really like what they did with Jenna here in this season, and we'll talk about her actual game, but I really like what they did with her from an edit perspective, because normally what they do with the female winners up to this point is they had made them invisible early on, and then they start to pick up, but they're always in the shadow of somebody. And they gave Jenna, I think, 8 confessionals or something like that in the first episode, which is unreal.
Ethan was the same thing where they hit him at the beginning. I know he's not female, but
so
they've done it a lot.
He played the under the radar female game.
Yeah, he pretty much did. But I think what's so cool about what they did with Jenna was they also didn't show her in an unbelievably positive light.
No.
We hear from Christy a lot. She won't even talk to me. She won't even look at me. That first tribal council they go to, Jenna's like, she's being ridiculous. We don't care. Like, whatever. Like, it's very dismissive. But they're also letting you kind of see both sides of her so that by the end of this, you're like, how could this girl possibly win? But also, like, how could she possibly lose? Because when you really watch it, the only thing Matt Von Ertfeldt does in this season is speak Mandarin and Cantonese to Daniel and become like legendary for that.
I felt so bad for Matt, and we'll talk about him. But that's what I like about Jenna, because you get such, winners are just so clean cut now. And Sarah has a ton of personality. Tommy has a ton of personality. We aren't really shown that. And I wish we were shown winners like Jenna more, because there was a lot of conflict in that season. And especially with Chrissy, that goes through all the way to the end. Jenna and Heidi are the kind of bullying mean girls.
Yes,
and
they
then
are. Yeah.
On the flip side, you have, not kind of, they certainly are.
They really are.
And they talk about that in the reunion. And Jenna's, Jenna obviously has a good heart. She's realizes how I was acting. But then Matt, everyone's like, he's such a creep. He's going to kill us. Like, Rob has that confessional. Matt's just like odd. I feel like I guess when you're in that kind of scenario, like, everything's just so much more exaggerated. But I felt pretty bad for Matt.
He's just socially awkward more than anything.
He's
Although
just a weird guy.
I'm just saying, like, when you watch the game, Jenna's edit is a lot more positive than Matt's throughout the entire show. Like, Matt's always kind of being shown as like a sidekick, if that. A sidekick or lower, He's
like Rob's sidekick halfway through the season.
Yeah, whereas Jenna was kind of like her and Heidi. I mean, Heidi is so unbelievably underrated, and like we talked about this a lot, Alexa and I. But Jenna, up until she gets sick at the end, she's kind of like the female focal point of the season, even up till she is the last female remaining. Like, we get the sense that this is the woman we're following through this season. I really believe that. So I really like Jenna. I think she's like kind of a forgotten winner because of what ends up happening in All Stars, unfortunately. And then with circumstances outside of the game, she doesn't play for Winners at War, but she wins what I think is the third best season of Survivor. She wins that season and she's on the right side. I was actually looking this up beforehand and I have it up right now. Jenna votes correctly 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times.
I think, right?
9 out of 11 times she votes correctly. And one of the times she doesn't vote correctly, she knows Heidi's going home, but she wants to vote with Heidi because she just has that good of a relationship. Yeah. That's unbelievable.
I will say that we can't talk about Jenna winning without talking about Rob losing, because I feel like what Jenna did, whether intentional or not, in terms of how she got to the end and won, is what Rob couldn't do. Though Rob did a lot of things that Jenna didn't do either. But the key is at that final 3. By the time we get to the final 3 and Matt decides to pull a Richard Hatch, even though he doesn't really know what he's doing, he's pulling a Richard Hatch and throwing the challenge so that either one of them will drag him to the end. At that point, Rob's ruined his own game. He's already built himself up as this huge threat and huge target. But that's all Rob undid himself the whole season doing that. Rob could have pulled off all the moves he did and kept his target lower. And I know not invisible, but he could have lowered his target still. But multiple times throughout the season, you'll see him do things where you're like, Rob, man, what are you doing? Like when he went to Jenna and offered that final 2 offer, and he's like, it's because I think I can beat you at the end. Like, bro, what are you doing, Rob? Don't tell her that. Tell her you want to go to the end with her because she's more deserving or some crap like that. Like he shouldn't have known better, and he seemed to know better until he gets to, I don't know. I feel like Rob is so good, but then he gets shaken up real easily sometimes. Like you'll see he'll be like, I have knots in my stomach. I need a carton of cigarettes. I know he's joking, but he's kind of serious. He's like, I need a carton of cigarettes, stuff like that. And I know Rob's talked about he used to smoke, so he may have been serious. But Rob, he built up his threat level so much. And there's just so many moments where he does it throughout the whole season, but that was the one that stood out to me the most was when he's talking to Jenna. It's just Rob, man, he really could have been dragged to the final 2 and beaten Jenna, but he built up his own threat level to the point where when it's time for Jenna to make a decision, of course she's going to pick Matt.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely, because she knows, and she's probably had that conversation with Rob already, that if Matt sits with you, like, you can probably beat Matt, but I want to bring you because I can beat you.
And Rob really how he should have sold himself to Jenna in order to beat her. I know this is I don't know if he ever beats himself up over this, but really how he should have been selling himself is like, I've screwed everyone, Jenna, and this is how he should have sold himself to everybody until it came time for whoever to decide the thing at the end. Like, I've screwed everyone. Like, no one's gonna vote for me. Like, he just needed to repeat that over and over and just get it in people's brains. They're around each other all the time. Anytime they talk strategy, Rob should be like, crap, I've screwed my own game up, even if he doesn't believe it, because he doesn't have to believe it. He just needs to say it and just tell people, I've screwed my game up. Like, no one's gonna vote for me at the end. Like, juries do not respect people who flip. Like, things like that. Like, do you think Jenna's watched more cases? I don't know, but he could have convinced her that flipping doesn't win, you know. And it's just like, it's something, I know you guys don't watch Big Brother, but the Dr. Will won Big Brother 2, and all he did all season was just tell people like, and no one likes me. Everyone hates me. No one's going to vote for me at the end. And he gets picked at the end, and then he dominates the votes at the end. And because he did play the best game, but the whole time he's telling people like, no one's going to vote for me. No one's going to pick me. You know, like, he just like downplays himself so much that the jury is all talking to each other about what they've done. Of course, they know what he's done. He just needs to convince people in the game that he's worthless. And so like Rob, like, I feel like Rob may have had some not ego issues, but like self-worth issues that he didn't want to downplay himself that much. Because he is acknowledged after the game that he played a lot of his game based on Dr. Will. But like, that was a crucial part of Dr. Will's game that he did that Rob didn't do. And I feel like that's a big reason why Rob lost and how Jenna was able to beat Rob. Because I know people say Rob got robbed all the time, but Rob robbed himself, unfortunately. It's really unfortunate because if he had won, this would be like top one season for a lot.
It would be like number one for like everybody. Alexa, what do you got there?
I think the ego was a huge problem. I think that's exactly what took him down. I mean, saying something like that to Jenna is not that's not a winning strategy. And then that chain of command he had with Matt, he had a better phrasing than I did, but it's pretty much he would talk to Matt. Matt would then talk to somebody else. That was all good. But then sometimes he would purposely send Matt on these wild goose chases just to mess with him. And that is funny. And I get that that's good TV and that provides a really good confessional. But that's something that, like, if Matt took a step back and looked at things differently, if other people realize that, that's a bad look. So I think he underestimates Jenna. And he speaks very highly of Heidi now. I think in the moment, I don't know if he saw it as much, but I think his ego is what got in the way.
He has said post, and of course nothing post is canon, but he has said post that he always viewed Heidi as a bigger threat than Jenna. And I do think on the show we see Heidi talking to people a lot more than Jenna, trying to convince people to do things, especially like Heidi talked to Christy about doing a Final 3 deal. We don't see Jenna doing that. Even though Christy tells us, well, they're both kissing my butt, they're both sucking up to me. We get that a lot this season with Jenna. And I know this isn't the Rob show, but why Rob lost is a lot of why Jenna won. Because Rob should have won. He screwed himself over. Well, but also with like the chain of command thing, it was like he would do it and it's like, it's funny and like it's super risky. But he went back and he would tell everyone, hey, here's what I'm doing. And everyone would laugh. And like in the moment, it's funny. But if you think long term, everyone now has, whether they realize it or not, the seed in their mind that Rob isn't super trustworthy. What if Rob tells me something and then laughs about it behind my back to other people?
Yeah.
And, you know, like maybe not everyone's thinking that, but that seed is there. So it's planted and it never gets manifested that we see on camera, but it doesn't mean it didn't have any effect on anyone. So that is how Rob screwed himself and let Jenna do what she did at the end.
But at the same time, like I always look at like Russell was like, I'll consider Russell Rob because Russell sat at Final 3 and lost. And I think he should have won that season. Whereas like Rob Cisternino, I have a hard time saying that he was robbed. Like, I think he played a great game, but I also think Jenna was incredibly smart to not take Rob with her. And we obviously know we can say all these things, but at the same point, Jenna has to walk up there and vote out the person who really did help her get as far as he did. And we see this in previous seasons where the person does take somebody who they were closer with. Colby takes Tina. Brian takes Clay, which he was going to do anyway because he can beat him. But, we do see this. Nalia kind of taking Vecepia as kind of going that route too. She thought she could beat her, and there was like this little deal. So she was smart enough to say, no, I'm not taking you, Rob, because you're going to win this thing. And, like we talk about it all the time, and Adam Klein is a huge advocate of this. You have to manage your threat level. You have to manage it. And at the time, Rob didn't know that, because I always say Rob Cesternino saved Survivor. Survivor would not be on TV still if it wasn't for Rob, because Rob was the first person to do the ping pong match. You go home, you go home, you go home, you go home. And he just kept going back and forth. Alex's blindside is epic on so many levels. Like, I love it. I love Dina going home. I love the Christie vote. Like, it's every week it's something new and it's amazing. Yeah. But at the same time, like, Jenna is so, like, she's so good at navigating that. And Jenna's got that mean girl thing going where it's like, well, I'm not going to win, so I just don't care. And it worked. Yeah. It worked. And Rob wasn't smart enough to see that, like, just because somebody is playing dead and maybe even thinks they're dead, it doesn't mean they're dead. Like, she was still alive, and he did not see that.
She played dead, but at the same time, I think when she was waffling on quitting, I do think that's something she was actually considering. But she wins those immunities at the end, and she kicks it into high gear at the end. And I know, immunities. Yeah, and I know that they're not
I think, or maybe
it's 4. I think you're right.
She gave 190, yeah.
They're not, which, I mean, well, let's talk about that. But, they're not your typical, muscle winning immunity challenges. One of them is the shuffleboard game, but she kicks it into gear. If she really wanted to go home, she wouldn't have won those. And her giving that necklace to Heidi, I mean, generally, it was pointless at best, stupid at worst, but it solidified Heidi.
I think Heidi was solidified anyways, but I think part of why people don't like Jenna winning in terms of the audience is the show seems like sometimes it would go out of its way to demean's not the right word, but put Jenna down, make her seem more selfish than she really was. I think one of the keys, and just today I was writing the script for her story video, so this is really fresh in mind. But one of the key things I thought, in terms of little things the show would do to make you think Jenna is not great, is when Christie wins that letter. And right before, so in the episode starts, we hear from Jenna, my mom has cancer. And you're like, what? I didn't know that. You think that would be something I was talking about all season, especially if we have a winner. Here's a little sympathy you could have for the winner, but we don't hear about it until it's relevant for the one episode. So Jenna's mom has cancer. Wow, really sad. The very next scene, you see Jenna, Rob, Heidi, Alex all laying down being lazy while Christie and them are working. Whether that was an edit thing or they really were being lazy that day, either way, it's what the show is showing us. So immediately undercutting Jenna and her sympathy. And then we go to the reward challenge. Christie wins her letter in a fair auction, I guess, between Jenna and her. And then Jenna cries. Jeff's like, okay, I'll give another letter, which, by the way, is a little shocking for Jeff. To give into something emotional like that.
He needed to be nice after last season.
I guess. And at the end of the season, he calls her spoiled. Yeah. Good job, Jeff. So anyways, he sells the second letter. Jenna wins it. By the way, Heidi bidding on that letter, knowing that Jenna, that was weird. I don't know if you guys
Why?
I remember that.
So bad.
What a jerk move, Heidi. Come on now. So Jenna wins the letter. And then we go back to the camp. And Christie goes to read her letter. And the first person, or maybe the only person we hear from, it's before we ever hear from Jenna, Matt says, I think Christie deserved her letter. Jenna was just being selfish. Why are we hearing this from Matt? It's the show's going out of its way. And that definitely, in that case, out of its way. Because Christie didn't have an issue with Jenna getting her letter. It was Matt. And I don't know if he speaks for everyone. I feel like if he did, it would have been Rob, because they Rob's confessionals way more this season. He has 90-something. But they go out of their way to make Jenna seem like she's selfish. She has selfish moments. Is she as selfish as the show wants us to think she is? I don't know. But they really go out of their way to make her look worse than she is. And I think it makes for an unsatisfying ending. And I think something that needs to be mentioned is that the season was spoiled before it aired. Because
I didn't know that.
Book about everything that happened that they found out. And I don't think that production was affected by that in terms of how they were editing people.
I did not know that at all. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah, there's a book. You can even find it on eBay still. Because I remember looking it up when Rob said something about it. But there's a book, and I forgot what it's called, but it completely spoils the Amazon. And it got published before it aired. I don't know what it's called. I forgot who wrote it. You have to look it up. But it does exist, and I looked it up.
There you go.
So I wonder if that affected like how they were editing Jenna, maybe to throw people off.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think when it comes to we'll talk about Jenna again in, I guess, like 45 minutes, but I think you see this with her quitting in All Stars too. Like, people, like, that whole season is so dark, and like no one is supporting each other at all. But I think when it comes to something that personal and something that like is clearly so real, I think, it's not just like, I really miss my family. It's like her mom was dying. So I think at that point, Jeff's like, all right, I gotta throw her a bone. Like, she deserves a little something there.
I have a lot that I want to say about why I think Jenna was edited the way she was.
Oh, please.
And and so this is what I really do think. We're watching a season. I think I'm cutting in and out, so I'm just gonna wait a sec. But we're watching a season that is men versus women. It's the first time they've ever done it. And look, this is one of those things. Like, again, you watch things in a time capsule. You got to put it into a vacuum. This existed in 2003. Yes, it still exists today, but they're taking the most egregiously men versus women confessionals they can find.
Oh, yeah.
To make it, Rob Cesternino says so many things that you would be like, wow, this guy's a sexist pig, but he's not. Like, we know he's not. And Heidi's standing over there going, I'm just going to take my top off and walk around with my boobs out because that'll distract the men, and that's all you need to do to win. Like, it's what we're doing is they pull the confessional. Same thing we always talk about with Coach. Coach saying that Gulliver's Travels is the greatest movie of all time, or Jack and Jill, whatever the stupid movie was. He's like, him saying that, he gets all the confessionals. And I think that's what they're realizing here is like, they wanted to do this boys versus girls. They didn't want to do men versus women. They wanted it to be boys versus girls, like the most immature, childish stereotypes of women, stereotypes of men. That's what they wanted. And I think because Jenna was on the female side, and in 2003, and I know a lot of people, still, but in 2003, Survivor, very heavily male produced show. And so the men are being shown as like the cocky, we're going to win the game. Yep. We're going to dominate. We're going to do all this. And the women are being shown as, well, we're hot and we can't make a shelter. Like, we don't know what we're doing, but at least we're pretty and we're going to go bathe now and all that. So like, it was these conflicting things. And I think Jenna, as the winner of this season, really fit into the storyline production wanted to tell, which was the women can't figure it out for themselves. They don't even want to be here. They can't even do anything. Jenna wants to quit at Final Five. Like, I don't even want to be here. I hate this. And like, they kind of wanted to show that like almost inept side, but then also have it be like, can you believe a woman defeated the men? So I think they really had to lean into all of these things with Jenna in order to make it complete their storyline of the men should dominate, but the women ultimately do get the better of the men on this season.
And I think the only person who was really protected in terms of the women I could think of was Christy. Christy was really protected in terms of making anyone look bad. And I almost feel like they made the women look worse because of how they'd focus on how Christy's being treated and how Christy feels. Whereas a lot of Christy's issues were just communication breakdowns. Like, she didn't effectively communicate with them. They didn't effectively communicate with her. And so because of that, she's throwing them attitude. And because of the attitude, they're saying they're going to vote her out because of the attitude. But in reality, it's back to the, it's almost like they need a therapist for their issues with Christy. Because when she gets to Tombaki, everyone's just nice to her. And everyone goes out of their way to make sure she can communicate clearly with them, which people weren't doing on Jabiru. But Christy was also like with this victim mindset of, well, no one's going out of their way to help me. And Christy doesn't ever think I can help myself. Mm-hmm. And I'm not super knowledgeable about the deaf community, so I don't want to give broad strokes here. My mother is a deaf interpreter. She's been doing it for like 10 plus years. And I know she's said things to me where the deaf community kind of has this thing where they do expect people to help them, I think, more because they're viewed as people with disabilities. And so I wonder if that came into play here where she was expecting maybe more help from the Jabiru camp, and they're not used to giving help. Maybe to adults, not children.
And this is what I think is most difficult about this situation. And this is why, like, Amazon, to me, top 3 season will always be a top 3 season. I think it's absolutely a phenomenal television show. And like you watch it now and there's things that make you cringe. But you have to remember Survivor was learning how to, like, TV was learning how to edit a deaf person into a show. So that's happening. Then on top of that, they have men versus women. Then on top of that, all the women on Jabiru, they're starving and in a situation where they're completely out of their element. Like they're being told, not only are you starting the season, and look, I'm not saying that the women need men on their tribe. I'm just saying that if you're making assumptions about Survivor, 4 men and 4 women is going to create a lot better camp than 8 women or 8 men. 4 men and 4 women, because there's different skills for different people and different things that people can do. And I'm not saying that the women can't build a shelter, because they clearly can. I'm just saying that.
But this group of women could not.
Yeah. And I think you need to like combine that. So the women are already being put into the situation where it's like, okay, maybe we're going to have to do different things that are out of our element. It's really difficult. We got to find food. We got to build shelter. We got to do all of this. And then on top of that, you were not expecting to play the game with a deaf person. I'm not saying that that's okay. I'm just saying that they weren't ready for it. And when you're already in this situation where you're so down, it's hard to kind of be able to look around and view things in the perspective that you would view them, the 3 of us sitting here right now, when we're well fed and know how to do everything. And Alexa, I can tell you want something here.
I want to say something, but there's also a jackhammer outside my window. So I think they also cast this season so like perfectly egregiously for it being a men versus women season. Each tribe, half of them are like young hot models, and the other half are like, we have like a school principal, and we have like we have our first and I believe only stay-at-home mom. Was it Jean? She's a homemaker.
Oh, that was Janet, who
okay.
brought the granola bar, which isn't true.
Yeah, which is absolutely wild. But I feel like, you know, they're going to cast a men versus women season. We need to get all the hot guys and all the hot girls and all the disapproving parents and just like let the tension get at each other. So I think when you combine that with how it's edited, like the girls that they can't build a shelter, and then the girls win the first immunity challenge, and Jeff just roasts the guys for it. So I think all of that just kind of snowballed and made it incredibly entertaining. And I think it makes the players think differently too. I mean, if you're cast on a Heroes, Healers, Hustlers season, that's a little bit different. But if I'm cast on a men versus women season, I don't know, my mindset will just be different. And we'll talk about how Yule played in Cook Islands. When you're cast on a season like that, you're going to act differently.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're going to talk about that one this week.
Yeah.
We'll save that for 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. But Alexa, I think you're bringing up a really good point here. And I think like a lot of people nowadays, like they would cringe at this. And like, I'm acting like I'm an old man, but I'm 28 years old. So I'm not that old. But I do think that like this battle of the sexes thing, that is like something that just, you know, it's always like boys versus girls, boys versus girls, boys versus girls. Like that's a thing that like people grow up with. I mean, that's just something that people have. And I know like, you know, things have changed over time, but that is just something like boys versus girls is something that's always a theme you can push. And this was the first season we really saw a themed season of Survivor, which again, we see in Pearl Islands, which we'll talk about, but this was the first themed season of Survivor, which was men versus women. And then they come together and how do they work together? And then, but you know, Jenna and Rob, and I would probably say Jenna, Rob, and Alex and Heidi. Those are the 4 stars of this season, because those are the 4 people that
Christy was definitely
and Christy, but I'm saying like in terms of this theme, they leaned into that theme so hard.
Sure.
With Rob being the nerdy guy who will he ever, I mean, there's literally parts of the season where it's like, will he ever get laid? Like those are serious questions that happen on this show. And so you have things like that. And then you have Alex who's willing to vote against Rob because he wants to sleep with Shauna. And then you have Jenna and Heidi getting naked for chocolate and peanut butter. But this is what they wanted in this season. That's what they wanted. And so that's why I think Jenna was edited the way she was. They wanted the things that everything Jenna brought is 100% what Survivor production wanted for Survivor Amazon men versus women.
I do want to briefly call back to the book. Somebody, Lode Alley, I think is how you say the name, in the comments is pointing out that the book is called The Spoiler by Chill One. I did send you guys a link But if anyone wants to know what the book's called, it's The Spoiler by Chill One. You can look it up. First Result is the book. And it was put out a month before the season. So I don't know if that was really enough time. I don't know how far out these episodes are edited, but I don't know how much of an effect that made on the season being a month before. But yeah, back to your point of the sexes. I feel like I don't know if the theme they came up with a theme after Thailand as like this will be a fun idea, because some crazy things happen this season. Like Matt and the Machete has been mentioned multiple times in the comments. Matt and the Machete could have been edited like in a very dark way, but instead what we get is Matt and his machete, and like we get like crazy sound effects, and we get Rob going, I think he's gonna kill us. He's going, he's weird, but it's not like they don't know it, but it never comes across as like he actually thinks he's gonna kill us. It comes across like really fun. Even when Rob's messing with Matt and like, Matt, hey, you should go talk to Butch and do this thing. Like, this could have been edited in a way it's like Rob's being a real jerk to Matt, but instead we get like Mission Impossible music or like the fun spy music. I forgot what the music exactly is called. But the editing really went out of its way to make things more fun this season. I wonder if the theme of Battle of the Sexes, or Men versus Women, was an attempt to inject fun into Survivor after Thailand not being very fun. Though in Thailand they teased the Battle of the Sexes, that they just didn't do it for some reason. I don't know why they teased it if they weren't going to do it. But
yeah, I think you're right though. I think they wanted something fun, and at the end of the day, the Amazon is fun. And I know that there's some moments where you're like, oh, we're cringing, because my favorite, and I think it's a hilarious moment after the women win the soap challenge and everything, and the men are such dorks, like they're such losers.
They don't know what to do.
And they have the bubbles up there, and the best is they go Rob and Dave and Alex, and then all of a sudden Butch is like, look, I might be 50 and I shouldn't be thinking about things like this, but I'm not dead. And they have the bubble for like Shauna or Jenna up there, and I'm just like, this is ridiculous. And like nowadays, I think people would find it to be like offensive and not PC and all of that. No. But at the same time, like, you put 7 guys on an island starving and like haven't seen. You have to remember too, they hadn't seen a woman in like 3 days by the time that they actually got to that. Like, that's the things that like they're going to talk about, whether we find that to be despicable or likable or laugh at. Really, they're going to let their guard down and they're just going to let it flow. And those are the types of things they're going to talk about. Get mad at what Roger's talking about at the end of the day. Don't really get so mad here at what I think these characters were talking about, these people, because at the end of the day, the women also knew that this is what was going on. And they're like, I'm going to use this to my advantage. I'm going to win the damn game. Jenna and Heidi getting naked for chocolate and peanut butter is not only the most iconic moment, it might be one of the best strategy moments we've ever seen in the show.
So, and you get some fun moments where it's like, they're just like taking a bath in the Amazon River. And this happens, I think it's twice in the season we see this. Like, once is like you see the split in age, or what they could call, or what Heidi calls the beautiful women bathe together and the ugly people bathe together. And for some reason, the ugly people are jealous of us beautiful people, which comes up in Tribal as well. I feel like we need to talk about that. The Tribal where Jenna is like, my beauty's a real thing I have to overcome, work twice as hard. But then there's the other time where they're bathing, where the men finally have joined Jabiru, and Rob's like, I just bathed with the swimsuit model. I love your feet. I bathed with the swimsuit model. Like, this is blowing Rob's mind. Like, Rob's like a 15-year-old kid in like a 24-year-old body, like with the way he's like, my mind's blown.
Yeah. I think that's important. But Alexa, you looked like you were going to say something about the sexist thing.
Oh, I don't think they'll ever do a men versus women season again, but if they did, it goes the exact same way. Mm-hmm. The guys get cocky, the women use it to their advantage. I think that doesn't change.
I completely agree. And I just that's just the way that just goes into the politics of just the world. I mean, there's men who have most of the time, the men have the inflated egos, and the women are going to prove them wrong. Like, that seems to be like a lot of the politics that we see a lot of the time. So I think that, that's something we saw on Amazon. We see it in Vanuatu, and we see it again in One World. Like, it doesn't change over the course of like 10 years. We're seeing really a similar storyline every single time. But, in terms of like moves Jenna made in this season, like, did she need to give the immunity idol to Heidi? No, but that's something that's, she's the first person to ever do it. Nobody else ever had the cojones to do that. So that's amazing. That's an amazing moment.
I think it was a very questionable move, actually.
Oh, I think it's questionable, but I think it's interesting that she did it.
It's almost like her logic with that move was thinking like, okay, Heidi's the target. If I give Heidi the necklace, then she won't be the target. That's what it seems like. And I'm sure there's more to it than that, but it really read like that. And it's like, well, no, then now you're the target, Jenna. Though I understand that right before Tribal, Rob came up to him and like, well, let's vote out Christy. She's not committing to anything. She's a wild card in a bad way. And I get that's what happened, but it just seems like, why give the necklace to Heidi if your goal is not to win the game? Mm-hmm. I didn't really make much sense to me. Maybe one of you guys can explain it, but I don't fully get the move.
I don't really get it either, but I think it's just cool that Jenna did it. Nobody thought that anybody was ever going to do it, and Jenna actually did do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is there anything else we got to say about Jenna? Because, we've pretty much hit a half hour on her.
We need to talk about the Tribal where she says that she overcame her beauty. Her beauty was a big detriment to her, and she overcame it.
I understand what she's saying here. And I know that like a lot of people will be like, oh my God, poor pretty girl. What a hard thing. But I think the underestimating of somebody like that, because at the end of the day, when we all sit down to watch Survivor Amazon, the reason we're shocked Jenna wins isn't really because of what we watch on the show. It's because on day one, when we see swimsuit model, we go, oh, okay, whatever. Like she ain't going to win this thing. Doesn't matter. Let's look for the real competitors. Jean's going to win or, maybe Shauna could win because at least she's got a brain on her. Like we're not looking at Jenna as a legitimate threat here. For no reason other than the fact that she's super hot and is a swimsuit model. And as she shows, she proves everybody wrong.
Yeah.
I think if you get in the not good, but if that conversation is not involving Christy, because I like what you said, Phil, like people. Oh God, how am I going to say this?
I feel like so far this entire podcast, I've been like, am I going to get questioned for this? But go ahead. Alexa.
Yeah, some people will sometimes look at hot people and say they're dumb. They're not strategic. There's this, there's that, whatever they are. So I agree with what Jenna was saying within that context. That absolutely should not in any way be compared to being deaf.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. Yeah. I forgot that that's what she compared it to. I got where she was coming from in terms of having to overcome, but yes, comparing it to being deaf, no, absolutely not.
I think I understand what Jenna's saying as well, by the way. And I think if Christy wasn't in this season, if she wasn't at the Tribal, it wouldn't have come across the way it did, because of course it's followed up by Rob saying, luckily I don't have a handicap. And of course, Christy brings up Rob's comment in Final Tribal, attributing it to Jenna. But she still votes for Jenna, which just shows how much better Jenna, I guess, was than Matt. But but Jenna saying that that people assume by the way I look, how I'm going to be, so I have to overcome like the stereotypes. Like I get it. It's just the way it was presented almost was like tone deaf to Christy being there, and I feel like that was a lot of Jenna and Christy's relationship. Was like Jenna's just like she doesn't get it. She doesn't understand Christy at all, or like what Christy has to go through. Jenna, I guess it attributes to Jenna's like self-absorbed edit that they gave her, which she does admittedly. The things she says are things she says. They didn't like make her say those. So they just tend to focus on them.
Yeah, which is interesting for a winner because normally they don't show the blemishes, and for Jenna they showed a whole lot of blemishes.
Yeah, they did.
And I mean, now we'll go over to Pearl Islands and another winner who had a lot of blemishes. I mean, we see a lot of, everybody loves Sandra, but a lot of things she said, you're like, damn, this is a vicious woman here. But Sandra Diaz-Twine, the only person to ever win the game twice. Now we're really just going to talk about this Pearl Islands game.
Oh, I think that's so good.
I think that's what we need to do, and not compare both of them. Not do Pearl Islands and Heroes versus Villains, because as I've said numerous times, people tonight might have been like, oh, what do you mean it's shocking Sandra won? It's absolutely shocking that Sandra won this season. It's easy to know now in retrospect. But back then, nobody saw it coming. Nobody thought Sandra was going to be the winner of the season. I still think people don't think Sandra won Pearl Islands. If they stopped watching Survivor after like season 10, if they were to look at the box or look at the cast, they'd be like, oh, it was Rupert who won. Like nobody thinks it was Sandra. So
I mean,
Sandra's not even in the winner's spot. They put Rupert.
Amazing. The best. But yeah, so everybody obviously knows the legend of Sandra, but when you look at her in season 7, unbelievably unpredictable winner, just like in season 6, just kind of like in season 5.
So many other bigger characters. Rupert, huge character. Johnny Fairplay, huge character. Yeah. Lil, huge character. completely alters the course of the game. Burton, Sandra's like the 5th or 6th biggest character on that season.
Savage is bigger.
Loud too,
Yeah, but it takes her too long to get loud because pretty much the rest of the season, it's like you really are focusing on everybody else. And I mean, we've had Fair Play on our podcast to say whatever it is Fair Play will say, because he says he'll stand by all of it. But, a good point he brings up is Sandra's very lucky that they were up 8-5 before they lost an immunity challenge, because by the time they got to that 8-5 advantage, they throw the challenge to get rid of Burton, which, obviously ends up backfiring on that tribe because then they lose the next 2 in a row. Mm-hmm. But they got up, and had they gone to that first tribal council, we don't know what would have happened, but maybe Sandra's the first boot. We know that her move obviously at the market was great, and speaking Spanish and being able to sell the shoes and do all that. And she's thieving, and it's absolutely amazing. It instantly makes her likable. But by the time we get to the first vote of her tribe, we've already kind of forgotten how much we like her. And it takes a while to get it back because of the season. So she was somebody who got very, very lucky that her tribe was as dominant as it was early.
I do think, though, that opening like 10-15 minutes of the first episode, is amazing, by the way. And I wish it was something they would do again. But she right out of the gate, she really impresses. And of course it helps that she knows the language, and that's why she impresses. But, most people have a winner's quote at the beginning. I almost feel like that opening 10 minutes is I know it's not setting for Sandra to win Survivor, but it really makes you notice Sandra's character. She cannot be hidden in the first episode, even if they wanted her to, because of how much she does in that first 10-15 minutes at the little village.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're completely right. I think normally we get Heidick says this is a whatever business trip, and Jenna says something about I don't even know what her winner quote is. But
she says, the men are so cocky. I just want to beat them so I can shut them up.
That's what it is. Yeah, she has a really good moment like that. Exactly. I forgot what it was, but that's a great moment. And yeah, Sandra doesn't really have it. You're right. It is more of this whole sequence.
Sandra's first quote, I think, is something like, I forgot exactly what it was, but paraphrasing, I know she ends with
Yeah.
I remember that part, but I think it's surprise marooning, and that's why when she said that,
yeah. But she has this huge moment in the pre-merge, or excuse me, in the God, I can't talk. I'm sorry. In the premiere. But past that, the pre-merge it's Rupert, and really until Rupert goes, and then she goes under tear, she's not really on the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that premiere is really her biggest spotlight, and you're right, until the second half of the show. And it's so crazy too, because this season doesn't have they don't swap tribes and tribe swap, which they did in 3, 4, and 6. We just talked about, not in Thailand. So this season there's not a tribe swap, but we can't overlook the outcast twist, which no one has ever had to overcome before and deal with that. I feel like that's very important to how the rest of the season plays out, especially because of the final 2. And how Sandra manages that.
Well, and a lot of people don't want to give credit to Savage because they didn't like him in Second Chance and whatever. But Savage leads an epic comeback in Survivor, but the comeback falls flat because they don't win. They end up losing because of the outcast, but it is because of the outcast twist. He got his whole tribe back into it, and then the outcast twist happens, and Lil, who Savage was terrible to. Now, granted, I get it. Savage was a dick. I get it. But at this time in Survivor history, you could be a dick to pre-merge players. You didn't have to be nice to them. You could be really, really mean because they were going home.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So get rid of her. She's going home. I don't care. I don't need to be nice to her. She's gone. And so, Savage wasn't ready for this, and his whole tribe wasn't ready for this. And it changes the entire course of the game, because then, even though they go into the merge 5-5, Johnny Fairplay brilliantly is able to bring Burton into their side, and Lil was never going to work with Savage again. So it's 6-4. Savage goes home. From there on, they have the numbers. Now, Sandra, though, what Sandra's moves are is they're all just those under the radar moves where she votes for John Dalton, Johnny Fairplay. I love how it's John Dalton on here, but she votes for Johnny Fairplay despite knowing Rupert's going home that night. because she just wants to vote for Johnny Fairplay because she freaking hates him, you know? So she was able to not vote for Rupert, but still know he was going home.
I do think that. Go ahead, Alexa. Go ahead.
No, just going back to her hating Johnny Fairplay. She never bought the grandma lie. She called that. So she was like, he's faking it. And everyone was like, you're horrible.
No, she would never do that.
So funny.
Almost Fairplay almost Heidegg people in that way. Like people like believe the fact that people believe Fairplay about the grandma, you know, is almost like the Heidegg making everyone think he's a good guy, and just not exactly the same, but similar. But I think what's another thing to report we haven't mentioned with the first 3 winners. Heidegg received no votes. I know I mentioned that. I think Jenna has only received 1. She only received 1 from Christy, and then Sandra got through this entire season, no votes against her as well. We're really in an era where like not being targeted is almost like it is a key to winning. Whereas like nowadays, it's not as important. Though Tony did it for the most part, it seemed like
Tommy did it.
Yeah, Tommy did it, but like Chris obviously did not. Nick did not. Nick had to fight his way. Ben Driebergen had to fight his way. I can't remember Wendell, and I think
Wendell had a struggle right at the merge, but because Chris Noble went home, and then him and Dom were able to work their way back into everything.
Smooth sailing, yeah.
So
it's not necessarily required, but it seems like back in these early seasons, especially, like people were not winning immunities to get to the end to win, except for Heidegg did it. But I don't think Heidegg even needed to do it.
I don't think he needed to either. It was more that it kept Clay safe more than anything. You know,
not to get back on Heidegg too much. Very talked about in the first part.
Yeah. It's hard because people always talk about how great Sandra is, and there's no denying. I mean, she's the only player to win their first 2 times playing. No man has done it either. So she's the only person to ever be able to pull that off, which makes her unbelievably, you know, great at the game of Survivor. But after Pearl Islands, nobody was like, oh man, I got to get Sandra back on the TV. We got to watch. I mean, when Heroes versus Villains cast came out, a lot of people were surprised Sandra was on that cast. You know, not many people were like, oh, wow, yeah, of course Sandra's back. She's coming out there with her army hat on, and people were really surprised.
Yeah.
And she's not really villainous. She was just kind of snarky.
She hated John.
Because she cussed, so she wasn't in that perfect hero role like Rupert was, for example. So she had a much rougher demeanor, I guess, and that's what made her a villain. Which is so silly, but
yeah, exactly. It doesn't make any sense. Why would that make you a villain? But back in the day, this is what we weren't used to seeing. I mean, we weren't used to seeing like the bad guys, and really, like, she should have been a hero because she's the one who's telling Johnny Fairplay to go F himself. Like, that's what we should love that, and we do love that. But she did it in more of a villainous way. It's just like, if you were to look at this, like, you can look at these things and you can say, okay, Jenna Morasca, she won 4 immunity challenges. That's how she wins the game. She wins the last one and is able to get rid of Rob. Brian Heidegg was able to convince Jake to go with him, and he took Clay with him to the end. That's how he wins the game. What, like, Sandra's move, what was really Sandra's big monster move on Survivor Pearl Islands?
She convinced Lil to take her over Fairplay at that final 3. That was actually a legit big move.
Yeah.
Which I think Lil would have probably done anyway, though, because she liked Fairplay, but she thought Sandra was better. If she was going to lose to somebody, she'd rather it be Sandra.
That final 3 immunity challenge, I think, proved everything. I almost call him Dalton. Fairplay's sitting there trying to cut a deal with her, and she's like, "Nope, I'm not doing it." And you're like, Dalton, and he knew he was done. Like, he had to have known, like, at that moment, because you only make deals when you're about to lose, at least, especially in early Survivor. Like Rob was trying to cut a deal with Jenna at Final 3 in Amazon because he knew he was going to lose. The thing is, you got to cut those deals at the beginning if you're going to do them. Whereas I know Nalia and Vesepia cut a deal in Marquesas, but that one could have gone on forever. I think they were just cutting a deal because they were like, yeah, we both agree to take each other. Like, this is not like we were already in agreement on this. Whereas like Amazon and Pearl Islands are trying to make new deals I don't think that the other person had really ever considered actually doing. Like, Jenna wasn't going to take Rob. You know, Will wasn't going to take Fairplay. They needed to like do something to add on to the deal, and there's not much you can do at Final 3 to make the deal any sweeter. You know.
Yeah. And people are bringing up like moments in here, and I like it. I mean, we have Ryan Chan who says Sandra turned on Trish when Trish was trying to get Rupert off. I mean, that's a good move for sure, but also it happens so early in the game that's not like what propels her to victory. The other one here, though, Zach M, her spying on Burton and fair play plotting against the girls. That's probably the move, because that's when she says, screw it, I'm going with Dara and I'm going with Lil, who weren't on my tribe to start, and I'm going to get rid of Burton and fair play, because that really did confirm that she was not going to be the person left out no matter what happened. Dara and Lil weren't close enough that one of them was going to definitely take the other to final two, and fair play wasn't close enough with either of them to do that. But had she gotten rid of Lil at that point, she probably doesn't win the season, because fair play and Burton are going to take each other no matter what. And then you also have Dara, who that was probably the only one Sandra could have beaten, because remember, everybody, people didn't realize that fair play was how fair play was at the time. Right. We as an audience knew, but they loved fair play on the island.
Yeah, he hiding them. That's what it should be called.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
You got hiding.
You got hiding when you believe the person's good, but they're not.
But they're not. They're evil. I need to go grab water because I'm about to have a coughing fit. So it's on the two of you to carry this for like a second.
That's okay. I want to point out that in Pearl Islands and also in Amazon, Sandra and Jenna both won 6-1, which had not been done before.
Another blowout.
Yeah, because Ethan was the biggest one at 5-2 in Africa, but everyone other than that was 4-3, 4-3. And we get to All Stars next; it's 4-3 again. So Sandra and Jenna, despite not being considered these great winners by most people, won 6-1. Like, they did not squeak by with a win, like Heidi did over somebody who was super unliked, which I think is very telling of their social game, even if we don't see their social game, on the screen.
Because I think with Brian, because Brian beat the ultimate GOAT, probably one of, if not the biggest GOAT in Survivor history.
Easily.
But that also I also see it as Brian could have been that person, but Lil never stood a chance. So I think even though one thing, like when you look back and watch, a lot of people say like, oh, watch out for Lil, like she could win. And I don't know if everyone is just BSing each other or if they were just looking for a reason to vote for somebody else. Mm-hmm. But I think Sandra knew she had it and does a pretty good job at her final tribal council, I would say.
Well, Sandra also does a good thing that she also does in Heroes versus Villains. And I'm not saying this is the linchpin in how she won 2 times and then didn't win the other 2 times, but she had everyone had a common enemy in her season and in Heroes versus Villains, where Heroes versus Villains, her enemy was Russell. And she's like, Russell, I'm against you. And even though Sandra wasn't like making like these big moves to like try to get rid of Russell, it's like everyone was against Russell. So Sandra kind of got like there was all the negativity was in one direction. So Sandra kind of was able to avoid that. And then in Pearl Islands, a lot of it was on fair play, I believe. And so Sandra, once again, everyone had like a common enemy, a common target. Sandra was never that. But then we get to Game Changers, and she can't get the target off her back. And Weeds Winners at War, she kind of screws herself. But I think the target would have been on her back eventually anyways, whether she does that move or not. So I think that's something that's really important that she does in her 2 winning seasons is there's a common enemy, there's a common target, and they don't go home right away. They're still there for a while.
I think, and this is totally jumping ahead, but the whole question of can this game win a current season? I think it totally can. I think we see a lot of people replicate it. But with her, because she's now played so many times, it's like you can't really see Sandra play another game. And when she tries to play another game, she gets voted out on day 16. Happens both times. So she can only play that way. And that's really interesting because you don't really see that with a lot of people. You see that with Rob, but past that, I feel like people can usually alter.
And so I missed this conversation for the most part, which, whoops. But I do think too, what Sandra did a really good job in the 2 winning seasons. I don't want to talk too much about Heroes Villains, so there's something to talk about later. But I think what she did a good job too was of aligning with the more powerful people who were so anti that negative person. Like, who was Rupert's number one? He was going to say Sandra every time. Like, he loved Sandra.
Yeah.
And Rupert hated fair play. So what does Sandra do? She hates on fair play with Rupert. But she always knows she's got to get rid of Rupert beforehand. Yeah. And it's the same thing with Russell. What does she do? She does the exact same thing she did in Pearl Islands. She teams up. First, she teams up with Boston Rob because Boston Rob is going against, Russell. It doesn't work out. Boston Rob goes home, but Sandra's still there. She hits the merge. And what does she do? She says to Rupert and she says to Colby, guys, Russell sucks. He's the worst. He's knowing damn well she's going to vote both of them out, but she's giving the illusion she's willing to work with you and willing to really be your number one, when in reality, that's just not the case.
We did talk about that a little bit while you were gone, but I think you did expand upon it, so it wasn't completely repeated.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah. No, we were talking about how Sandra basically had a common target, common enemy that everyone, especially in Heroes vs. Villains, which I know we're not talking about a lot, but I feel like there's parallels between both seasons of everyone has a target, everyone knows who the big dog is, and it's not Sandra. Whereas in Game Changers, Winners at War, Sandra is the big dog, especially in both seasons. Just for being a 2-time winner, not because of her gameplay in the first 2 seasons, just because she won twice. So that's something that it's going to be so interesting to talk Heroes versus Villains, because how does a winner get to the end? It's so interesting, but here that's not the case. So
yeah,
Sandra does a lot of things this season that are fun and funny. Once again, it's a very social game. She wins 6-1. We mentioned, by the way, while you were gone, just like Jenna, 6-1. Nobody had done that before either of them. They did it back to back, which I think is just impressive.
It has a lot. Well, this one did have a lot to do with who she was sitting next to, though. And it was because Lil had been voted out of the game, and a lot of them were just so anti that. And then a lot of them were also just very anti Lil. Like, Lil really annoyed a lot of people. And I think she always had the best intentions, but she did annoy a lot of the people who she was out there on the island with her like Scoutmaster kind of over the top, overly emotional. It rubbed. I mean, her voting out Savage.
Yeah,
she gets T's vote, but it's mainly because T just really didn't like Sandra. But she gets T's vote. She was never getting anybody else's vote from her tribe. She wasn't going to get Rupert's vote. I mean, Fairplay was never going to vote for Lil, because Fairplay at the end of the day, he doesn't want to say like, oh, I lost to Lil. Like that's, and Lil didn't take him. So he's like, F you. Burton's not going to, like, it's just like everybody was just not going to vote for Lil. Whereas like, I think Jenna's win is a little bit more like, she was kind of the better player there. Obviously, Sandra's the better player here, but it also had a lot to do with the fact that it was Lil. Lil. She'd been voted out of the game.
My wife didn't believe me when I told her that there was a woman who played an entire season in a Boy Scout uniform. She thought I was joking. And I was like, no, I'm serious. And she didn't believe me. I had to show her a picture.
Very fair.
I had to show her a picture because she did not believe me at all. And I'm like, yep, she made it. I didn't tell her how far she made it, so don't tell her. But no, it's just so interesting. Lil's a goat.
Absolutely.
She's a goat, and it's because of the Outcast twist. Though, to be fair, if there wasn't the Outcast twist, she wouldn't have been available to be a goat.
And that's another thing. Like, we talk about this a lot through like on our podcasts and stuff, like especially when I'm defending Michelle, people always be like, well, Michelle only won because Joe DeCampo got sick. And I'm like, okay. And Aubrey only got that far because Neil had to be medevac. Like it's the same thing. And I think that this is one that's tough though, because the legend of Sandra, think about what this season did with the Outcast twist.
Edge of extinction, basically.
Yeah, basically. But I just want to put this into perspective since we're talking about the winner here, and it is Sandra, and it is as legendary as it is. Without the Outcast twist, Lil and Burton don't come back. So we get down to a final 8 where it's those 8 people who are still left. Savage, Rhino, Rupert, Fairplay, Sandra, all of them. Andrew Savage comes back for All-Stars 100% of the time if there's no Outcast twist. That means Boston Rob doesn't. That means Boston Rob and Amber don't get married. Amber doesn't win, which we're about to talk about Amber anyway. And I don't think Sandra wins this season because this was huge for her. She was able to get, because if you think about like how this season plays out for the most part, even though she throws a vote at Fairplay when Rupert goes home, Rupert does not get voted out when he gets voted out if Burton isn't back in the game. So it's a lot more difficult to get Rupert out of the game because a lot of the people on the original, for some reason I'm drawing a blank, they were on Drake, I guess, but on the original Drake tribe weren't willing to vote Rupert out of the game. Krista didn't vote for Rupert at that vote. Obviously Rupert didn't vote for Rupert at that vote. And then Sandra didn't vote for Rupert at that vote. So 3 of the 5 who were left in the game at that point didn't vote for Rupert. But Fairplay hates Rupert, so of course he votes for Rupert. And he has a little sidekick because he's got Burton. If Burton's not there, Rupert doesn't go home. It's a lot harder for Sandra to win this season. Now, granted, Sandra's still great because she did exactly what she's supposed to do, and that was go to the end with somebody who had been voted out.
Please the jury. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, that's it. But it's interesting to think about how much of an impact this outcast twist had on so many different elements of Survivor moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And we were saying that Sandra had a pretty solid final tribal council, and that's where the first time where she says, "As long as it ain't me," she totally owns it. It benefits her that Lil just got totally roasted, and to be fair to Lil, she didn't, she couldn't have taken that thing off. Like everyone just ripped on her for wearing the Boy Scouts uniform. Like what else was she gonna wear?
Yeah, what was she wearing underneath? I don't know.
Like it does. Yeah, exactly. It's like they're acting like she had copious amounts of clothing to be wearing, while Rupert's walking around in like a half dress, half shirt thing. Like what was she supposed to do? Like it's just it was like kind of like just bullying. Yeah, I feel like at that point because they just didn't like her.
And she was talking about like the Scouts on her all the time, which is like rip on her for that. That's totally fine. But I think Sandra did a really good job in her final tribal.
Mm-hmm. We haven't really mentioned it, but the classic, Sandra's, strategy is anyone but me. I don't think we've mentioned it once so far, which is a shame on us.
Yeah.
But, anyone but her. That's what her game plan was. She didn't care. It's almost like Heidek, but in terms of like how it's just a game. And I feel like we're almost like getting in like a trend here of like, people who view it as just a game. But it's like, how do you balance it's just a game with balancing relationships? That's one thing Sandra had to do here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think Alexa's frozen.
Uh-oh.
Unfortunately.
Just staring at it.
Let's jump over to All-Stars, and maybe Alexa's back now. So here we go. Let's jump over to All-Stars. But before we do that, the one thing we didn't say, can Jenna Morasca's game still win? Because we didn't actually do that. So just real quick, Wes, can Jenna Morasca's game still win? Yeah.
What is Jenna Morasca's game? Like, what are we defining her strategy as? I feel like we've just defined the first 5 people's strategies. Mm-hmm. What was Jenna Morasca? And by the way, Heidek, I feel like did not evolve. I know I did a lot of talking about how the strategies evolved. I feel like Heidek didn't evolve the strategy from season 4 to 5, but he did successfully pull off a new kind of strategy with the ghost strategy, which that part of his strategy holds up. Jenna's strategy is what? What is Jenna's strategy? That's probably
hard to define.
I don't know what Jenna's strategy is. Oh, come on. I don't know what Jenna's strategy is, but and then we talk about this with a lot of people. The way that she talked to Christy and being being the mean girl does not win. Being the mean guy does not win.
No.
I don't think she can win because of that.
Yeah.
It would make her a goat, actually, in Modern Survivor. But people don't want to live with that. I don't think we get a lot of goats who are mean to people. We get a lot of goats of people who just won't make moves or won't make the flashy moves. But we don't get a lot of mean people getting dragged at the end of Survivor now.
I do think, though, something that Jenna was able to do, and I don't think that she can win. I don't think that type can play again. But if we're just going to say, like, what was her strategy? I think her strategy was really to adapt to whichever way was the best way to go. And I don't think we really had seen that up to that point. But she votes out Shauna. And her and Shauna were close early on. They were the hot girls, like they were close, but she votes out Shauna before the merge because she saw that she was getting too close to Alex and she saw a better opportunity with Rob. And I know that people say, well, she rode Rob's coattails and that's all it was. But I do think that her strategy was to adapt to all the situations, and whether she whined about it and hated it or was able to successfully just kind of face it head on, I think that was really her strategy, was just to evolve, to adapt.
Sure. And another thing I mentioned, how like sometimes the most important move is just keeping your alliance together. She didn't really have the option because Rob kept blowing up the alliances, which is so much fun to watch. But Jenna would come out of like getting blindsided by the Alex vote and be like, I hate Rob, I can never forgive him. But then Rob comes back and he's like, well, actually, I want to work with you guys. And Jenna it seems like such a small thing, but it's actually just a big thing. Her ego didn't get in the way. She's like, no, I'm not going to, screw you now. I'm not going to vote with you. I'd rather let my game sink than vote with you, which we do see people do. Jenna doesn't do that. Yeah. Heidi doesn't do that. So it was dropping your ego sometimes is a great move because it hurts to do. You really hate this guy, but for the sake of your game, it's the best move.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Jenna's strategy is easily definable. So can her strategy hold up? I don't know, because I don't think we can clearly define what her strategy was from the season.
Well, let's jump over to All Stars then, and
Well, we haven't answered. Can Sandra's game hold up?
oh yeah, Sandra's game can hold up for sure.
Absolutely,
for sure.
Yeah. As long as
easiest one.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But all right, we go over to the worst season of the first 8 seasons. In my personal opinion, and in fact, I just want everybody to know this, like, because Alexa and I never did like a season. We did a season ranking a while ago, but I have been ranking them as I'm rewatching. Thailand's the 6th best season of the first 8. You guys can all figure out what's number 7. But I didn't say that. But talking about All Stars here, a rough season. Not what any of us expected. Yeah, not what any of us expected at all coming into this. We saw a lot of legendary players, but everybody kind of had their own agendas, and we kind of get stuck with an end game here that isn't. It's exciting, sure, but it's not the people we really wanted to see in the end game. Nobody wanted to see Jenna Lewis and Alicia and Sheehan and even really Amber and Rob until this season started. Nobody really knew how much they wanted to see them. But we're going to be talking about Amber now. As the winner, still Amber Burkich at the time, as the winner of Survivor All-Stars. What do we think about Amber? Because I have very little to say.
I do want to say that something important that is going to obviously be brought up is how, once again, similar to the Amazon, how Rob lost is how Jenna won. How Rob lost here, different Rob, is how Amber won. Because we talked in length about how Rob blew his game, but I think here what's important is how Boston Rob blew his game. Because you say you don't have much to say about Amber, and maybe Alexa you do, and I don't want to cut you off, but I rewatched All Stars recently, and I once again could not clearly tell you, similar to Jenna, what Amber's strategy was besides hitching herself onto Rob and letting him be the bulldozer, and she's just behind the bulldozer avoiding all the fire, which is a legitimate strategy.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. Now that we're talking out loud. Because I think it's one of those things where I rewatched it a while ago, but I disliked it so much, so I couldn't totally follow it. But I can't tell if it was subconscious or not, because she has the social game, and Rob in that season did not. So did she know that and say, okay, well, I also really like this guy, so I'll go to the end with him. One, because I like him, and also because, Jenna Lewis was popular with that group. If she and Jenna Lewis in some way end up in the final 2 together, I think it's more competitive, and I actually think Jenna could probably win.
I think Jenna wins.
I think Jenna wins
easily. Jenna Lewis is the winner of Survivor. She wins the final 3 challenge.
Don't ever say that again.
I think Jenna played a good game. I'll say that. She played a game that none of us wanted to watch, but it worked. So I don't think Amber sat there and said, okay, this guy's a total jerk, so I'm just going to take advantage of that. But I think she certainly saw that. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that it comes naturally to her. We see this in Winners at War. She's a kind person. Mm-hmm. So I think that's not something she really had to try to do. I think that's just who she is.
I think that they got a really lucky break on their tribe, Rob and Amber. And I feel like they're almost hand in hand on how this whole game wins. They got a lucky break on their tribe because let me double check the starting tribes, but I don't think there was any winners on their tribe.
They had the easiest starting tribe because they had Sue Hawk, Big Tom, Alicia, Boston Rob, Amber, and Rob's sister Nino. There's one target there. Yeah. And then you have Sue, who's an easy boot if you need to do it.
Yeah. Sue is annoying. Alicia, we didn't see a great gameplay out of her. We didn't see great gameplay out of her in Australia Outback. And once again here, she doesn't really do anything to improve upon it. So we got, 2 easy people in terms of that. Then you got those 2. Big Tom, I feel like is smarter than he cares to admit or he wants to appear to people. I feel like Tom has he wants to maintain this persona of I'm just this goofy, fun guy. But reality is he's a lot smarter and he wants to make these moves. And you hear this season and in Africa where he's secretly behind when camera's not around, telling people hey, if you do this thing, I won't stop you. Mm-hmm. But it gets him in trouble every time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do think starting on Shapira was a very big influence. I mean, if you think about just the tribe I just named, the average placement on that tribe is 7th place. It's not good. It's not good. And, for Amber, what's hard is Amber gets a bad rap because of Rob. Like the people who don't like Rob don't like Amber, and the people who do like Rob don't think Amber should have won. So she gets a bad rap because of Rob. But what people forget is Amber's not like a vicious person. Amber's not a mean person. Amber's a very, like Alexa said, a very nice, kind person. And I think that gets lost in this season because everybody says Thailand is one of the ugliest seasons of Survivor. All Stars is the ugliest season of Survivor. I mean, up until obviously what we had in Island of the Idols and the moment in Game Changers, this is the ugliest season that didn't have any outside influences on why it was so ugly. I mean, think about this. From the word go, we have Jenna Morasca leaving because of the situation with her mother. We have Sue Hawk quitting and screaming.
She has to defend that. Like she has to defend it.
She has to, because everybody's telling her, well, you shouldn't have been out here in the first place. It's like, okay, go F yourself. Who gives a crap? And then it's like Sue Hawk is quitting and screaming at Jeff. Everybody is just hating. Like everybody wants to get rid of all the winners and they're being mean to each other while they're doing it. This is the first time we really saw nastiness from the players, which probably is great for production because they want that edge. But the Lex and Rob situation is absolutely horrific. The Rob and Kathy situation is terrible. Rob and Big Tom becomes terrible. Rob and Alicia, like everything is so bad. But the one constant is it's Rob and Amber just kind of skates by. And, Amber didn't really have a plan coming into Australia and shouldn't have been on All Stars, but she did the same thing she did in Australia, except this time it worked because the person she hitched to went to the end.
Well, here's a fun fact about All Stars. Just take a guess at how many votes until maybe you already know this, but guess how many votes Rob received against him before Final Tribal. But throughout the game, how many votes did he receive against him? Do you guys know?
I feel like one.
I don't remember, honestly, but I'm going to say it's just one because I feel like his whole alliance didn't want to vote him out until it was too late.
He got one vote, and it was from Rupert on the Rupert vote. And then if you go over to Amber, guess how many votes Amber received along the way to her before she won?
Probably a lot more.
It's more, but just take a guess.
I have no idea.
I'm gonna say 6.
Yeah, that's actually exactly right. She got 6 votes. Driver Wiki. So she received 6 votes, and Rob received 1 along the way. I mean, what does that tell you? That and Sheehan votes against Amber twice, but then votes for her at the end of the game. And Sheehan was like the only one who seemed actually truly impartial by the way she talked at Final Tribal about like, I'm voting for Amber because I feel like she played a better social game, essentially. Whereas everyone else was like voting, it seemed like in spite. Whereas Shannon was the only one who seemed like she's voting actually based solely on how they played a game, which I think is
and that's the thing. Like Tom just was never going to vote for Rob because that's the kind of guy Tom is, and he hates Rob. Sheehan, she votes for Amber, like you just gave the reason. Alicia was never going to vote for Rob. Alicia didn't like. That's not the type of person, and this is like why. People always say Rob's the greatest player ever. Rob's the greatest player ever. And I just sit here and I'm like, no, like he can't be the best player ever because there was no adapting. And like I say that in Marquesas when we were talking about Vesepia. Vesepia kissed ass. He did not. And now I look at exactly what happened in this game. Did he do a phenomenal job of keeping his alliance intact? Absolutely. He was able to convince. I mean, the best line is take care of her. If you take care of her, I'll take care of you. Whatever the hell the line is, it's a phenomenal line. And it's the reason why him and Amber are able to go far in the game because he convinces Lex to vote out Jerry, which is the stupidest move maybe in Survivor history. But the reason Rob doesn't receive any votes is because Rob is sitting there and has convinced everybody that he likes them as much as he convinced Lex he liked him. So everybody is convinced they're in, like Rob is going to final 2 with them, or at least final 3. And that's why he ends up getting Jenna Lewis's vote and he ends up getting Rupert's vote because he did take them pretty much as far as he said he was going to take them, but what's so brutal about his game is that he's lying straight to Tom's face. He's lying straight to Alicia's face. And they just don't want to deal with it. They don't appreciate it. They hate it. And he never was able to really convince the people he needed to give him that one more vote that would make him the sole survivor. And if he wins All Stars, then sure, we can sit here and call him one of the greatest of all time. He still is one of the greatest of all time, but we could really make an argument for number 1. But the fact that he didn't win this game, it's not just because Amber was more likable. It's because of things Rob did throughout the season.
Yeah. If Rob wins this season he wouldn't have played Redemption Island, obviously, if he wins the season. But if he won this season instead of Redemption Island, I think we would really, truly be saying how Rob is right there with Kim Spradlin, maybe Tony Vlachos. I know those are the three I hear. The two I hear the most commonly now as the best winners on their seasons that they won. I feel like if Rob wins this season, this is considered a great win by him. Even though it is still a dark season, the season's still dark regardless. Mm-hmm. Him winning the season would mark him as one of the best winners. Where I feel like the Redemption Island one has a big old asterisk because he's a fourth-time player with a bunch of first-time players, and a season that seems set up for him and Russell. So
it's like everybody else was playing or he's playing in a home run derby where somebody's throwing underhand to him, and everybody else is playing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs down the middle, and they've never swung a baseball bat in their life. Yeah, it's really unreal.
But winning these all-star seasons, I feel like almost makes. And we're not ranking winners, but it almost makes your game more impressive because you're beating people who do know how to play.
Exactly.
Especially, and this is the first iteration of All-Stars that Survivor's done. You can call Game Changers All-Stars 2 if you want, or these other Heroes versus Villains maybe you call All-Stars 2. But really, truly, I mean, if he wins this season, if he's able to be better at Final Tribal, if he's able to treat people nicer, it's almost a little bit like Russell had, just mistreatment of the jury, men. And Russell has the same issue, except Russell also doesn't adapt. It's very weird how similar they are. Russell never adapts his game. Rob doesn't really adapt his game. He gets older, more mature,
and he's also lucky he started on Ometepe.
In Winners at War, he did not adapt whatsoever.
No.
He got very lucky that he was on Ometepe and was able to convince them, like, Matt, we need to get rid of Francesca and Philip fighting. And then he's able to just take Philip and Natalie Tenorelli right to the end with him. I mean, and it was so easy for him, but we'd seen it so many times. Like, it's hard to give the amount of credit for that. And I know I'm going to get panned for this, and I really don't care because I'll go to the grave saying this. I mean, we'll talk about Redemption when we get there, but like, it's hard to say, oh, that's the most impressive win ever. It's a fourth-time player playing against a bunch of first-time players. And we see it in this season in All-Stars. The people with the big targets were going out first. Like all the winners are gone pre-merge. Rudy's gone. Who else was pre-merge?
You want to talk about, by the way, when we got to last week, you said when we get to All-Stars, you want to talk about how impressive Ethan played this season.
Yeah, I thought he was great.
He played better in Africa.
I think he played really great. He was playing with his back against the wall. He never really had his back against the wall in Africa. And he was never going to win. He was never even going to make the merge. No. But gets the focus off of him. They end up getting rid of Tina. They get rid of Jerry before him, right?
No. Jerry's right after him.
Who did they get rid of before him?
They get rid of Colby before him.
Yeah. That was it. Yeah.
That's a big one.
I mean, Ethan survives 1, 2, 3, 4 tribal councils before he gets voted out, which is impressive. And by the way, I'm trying to help you plug tomorrow. Wink, wink. But
no, I get you. And we will. But I'm saying, like, with Ethan too, though, he started on a tribe with Jenna Lewis, who was the most adamant about vote out winners. They had their chance. They don't deserve to be here. Get rid of them. And so she votes out Tina first, and then says, we can't keep losing. Otherwise, I'm not going to get a shot. So I'll keep Ethan. And let's get rid of Rudy. And then Jenna quits, which was very lucky for all of them. They get one win in, and then the tribe switch up. And Ethan gets Rich to go before him. Makes sense. Rich goes home. He was a winner. And then the Colby one. That was a huge one. If Ethan's tribe doesn't lose that next challenge and Shapiro loses, Ethan probably does make the merge and would have been the only winner to make the merge. And it's really impressive. Like, it really is. So I think it's an impressive game there. I think he played really well. Obviously, it gets forgotten because it's a pre-merge, and at the end of the day, pre-merge is pre-merge. But when you take into account, that's what's also tough about this All-Stars game with Amber and Rob, is that Amber and Rob were coming in with no target whatsoever. They had no target. And so, yeah, did they play amazing? Absolutely. But they weren't top 8 people to be voted off on anybody's radar. And if you notice, one thing that is consistent throughout the season is the people who came into this season without a target on them did not go home until everybody with a target on them went home. That's the biggest. If you look at this final, what is it? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you look at the final 7, there is not one target left in the game. Mm-hmm. It's huge.
I gotta say, there's a lot of episodes. I was looking at what episode Ethan went home. He went home in episode 8. There's a lot of episodes in the season.
It's a long season.
Because the 2 quits, I think, were solo episodes.
Let's see.
Jenna one was definitely a solo episode.
Right. Susan and Jenna were both their own episode on their quits. That's just so much. That feels too much.
It is too much.
At times it felt like too much because it was like we didn't get to the merge till episode 11, and we're so used to like hitting merge 7. Yeah, episode 7, unless we're doing a fake merge. But episode 11, though, I think 9 was a recap because they were doing recaps back then. But regardless, it was just so long to get to the merge. Ethan would have made the merge in a regular season. Episode 8 is usually already at the merge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, I don't know why that just reminded me, but with it being such a dark season, I think in promoting Winners at War, Ethan posted this like awesome secret scene of, I forget who the tribe was. It was like Rob, Amber, Rob Sestonino, I think Tina. And what they were doing was they were doing a mock tribal council where everybody played someone else, and Rob played Ethan. I think Amber played Tina. It is unbelievably funny.
Sestonino plays Jeff.
Yeah, it's Sue's in it. I forget who Sue plays, but
I think she plays
so unbelievably funny.
Yeah. That was a great scene. That's almost like an early sign of like, why isn't this in the show? You know, now we ask that question because there's so much heavy, but like back then it's like, man, a fun scene like this would have made this dark season feel a little bit lighter.
Would have been a little nicer.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's what's ultimately so weird about this season too, is if you think about a season like Thailand, unbelievably dark season with an unbelievably dark winner. You know, like it's a nasty season with a nasty winner. And then you get to a season like Amazon, unpredictable season with an unpredictable winner. You know, you get to a season like Pearl Islands, like Sandra really does define that season. You know, like Rupert defines it and fair play and everything, but Sandra is kind of like that person who is in the middle of the chaos and is both likable and unlikable, which we hadn't really seen yet from a winner. You know, she's a little bit of both. And that's what Pearl Islands is. It's got its really great characters with their great moments, and then some of like just awful Austin quits and all of that. Like, but this season, the winner does not represent the season. Not even in the slightest bit does Amber represent what took place in All Stars. So
and we think that Winners at War because she talks about it.
Yeah,
you know, talks about how she feels. I mean, that's so crazy. Like even to this day, but I feel like it's like her legacy. Like you look up Amber Mariano, Amber Burkich, like this is what you get. You see, like she played Survivor twice and she won one, and nobody really cared. But it almost gets overshadowed. It's almost like thank goodness, by the way, they got married because it really helps that final that reunion or whatever you want to call it.
That would have been bad.
Yeah, like if
that
there was
epic reunion.
We've just been ripping into Amber. How did you win? Like Jeff would be like, "How did this spoiled swimsuit model?"
yeah.
This other spoiled woman.
Yeah, another spoiled woman like Jenna from Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, yeah, this reunion is one of the best episodes of Survivor. I mean, it's so good. I mean, I love it. Just the hatred for everybody. Like those wounds had not healed. That's for sure.
And it's such a winner because Jeff, so Suhawk, like I don't know if she gets a settlement. Like I don't know what went down with that, but Jeff introduces, direct quote, the new Sue Hawk, and like shows her off, and she stands up, and I think she got like Botox or something, or she got something.
Yeah,
but they she was like, "Oh, I got all this money, like it's all good." Like it was just unbelievably ridiculous. Yeah. But then Jerry gets booed off the stage, and it's
I feel so bad for Jerry, but we'll get to her almost winning season eventually.
Yeah, we really will. We really will. And you know, I mean, this is what happens a lot of times with All-Star seasons. And I think Sarah Lucina, Jeremy Collins broke the trend. It was really him who broke the trend. But a lot of times in these All-Star seasons, or even like, I guess half and half's not fair because Parv did play really solid. But even in that season, Sari played the better game. I think what we see a lot of the time is in these seasons, like somebody you're just really not anticipating to do well does really well, like and wins the game. Amber winning. I mean, even coming into fans versus favorites. It's kind of the same thing with Sandra going into heroes villains. Nobody was like, oh my God, Parvati, the queen, the greatest player of all time.
No.
How could we ever like dethrone her? Nobody was saying that.
No.
So for her to win, it was like she beat Amanda, she beat James, she beat Ozzy. Are you kidding? Like, it was shocking that it was Parvati. And then we see the same thing again with Sandra, and we kind of see similar things as just, the years go on until really Jeremy Collins kind of breaks that trend. Or I guess Tyson kind of does, because we could all kind of see Tyson winning out of the returnees there. But it's just something that unfortunately we see a lot. And we see for the first time in All-Stars, you see probably, I'm sorry, Amber, probably the least deserving person to be on that season wins the season. And I'm not saying that she was the least deserving winner, because as the game went on, she plays a better game than a lot of them because she was the closest to Rob, and that's why she wins. Mm-hmm. But nobody was like pumped that Amber was going to be on All-Stars.
I will say that I feel like Amber and Rob both played very similar games to what they did the first time, because Amber in Australian Outback hitched her wagon onto Jerry and rode that Jerry train until Jerry gets blindsided. And then Amber doesn't have whatever it is, whatever the gall, the balls, whatever you want to call it, to flip and to go join the other side that just blindsided her and Jerry. She was on the Jerry train till the end. Jerry goes home. Amber's out in the cold. She gets voted out. Here, she hitches her wagon onto Rob, which, by the way, I feel like is probably the strategy we're going to define her as, like hitching your wagon on somebody because somebody else does it here in Samoa. It is a legitimate strategy. It works in later Survivor. Hitching your wagon on somebody, let them be the villain, to the very end. But Rob plays as the Rob father in the Marquesas, and here he is, the Rob father part 2. And then when you get to Heroes vs. Villains, it's like he wanted to do it, but he really didn't make it far enough to be the Rob father again. And he's playing against a bunch of people who are much smarter as well. And then we get to Redemption Island. It's like the true Rob Father Part 3. It's like the trilogy of Rob.
Well, I was actually going to say that really Heroes versus Villains is the ultimate Rob Father Part 3, because like it follows ultimately what the Godfather series did. First time, really good. Second time, really good, really dark, really vicious. Third time, nobody really cared, and it was a long time after. Nobody wanted to be a part of it anymore. That's how I really feel about Rob. But hey.
We'll get to his future ones.
Yeah, so you said you think that this type of strategy can win again. Alexa, Alexa, what's your take?
Me. I don't think so. Because I think again, like to your point, Wes, I don't really know what the strategy is, but from what I've watched, it's the hitching her wagon, and the person who does it now gets berated for being the coattail rider. So I think in like this kind of game, in this current game, but then again, Rob was a jerk, and that doesn't do well. So I don't think so, but I guess it depends who she's with.
Well, as Sesternino says in the Amazon, sometimes I feel like he said this in the Amazon, or like you just have to find someone who's more disagreeable than yourself. That's what Amber does here. And that's what Natalie White does in Samoa. You just find someone who's more disagreeable than yourself. And, if they get to the end, and in a final 2, it's perfect. In a final 3, I feel like it's a lot harder to be in that position because you have 2 people who are more disagreeable than yourself, which as we have seen is a bigger struggle, which I feel like is part of why they made a final 3. But it is still possible.
I don't think
it's a little easier.
I was just going to say, I don't think that this type of strategy can win anymore, because if you do try to latch on to somebody as hard as Amber did and you make yourselves this known, you get eliminated right away as a power couple. We see it all the time. I mean, power couples don't make it an episode anymore in Survivor, and I think that was ultimately what would end up happening now. So I don't think that this strategy can work anymore. I think we're split pretty much for this. Season 7, well, season 7 can win maybe season 6, but 5 and 8, those strategies can't win anymore.
Well, if we're saying can it win 41, I feel like it's less likely. I'm just thinking of the fact that it did win again later, but 19 was so long ago, I guess now.
Yeah, 19 was in the first half. I don't think it could win anymore.
That's a good point. Someone's saying, is the closest comparison to Wendell with Dom. Yeah. But I feel like Wendell did a lot more than, saw a lot more.
Wendell played very hard in that season.
Someone said, so Wendell won because he's prettier than Dom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he did. And I think that we'll talk about that, but I feel like they wanted to make it a social versus strategic game, like who ends up winning that. But Wendell was very strategic and Dom was also very social.
Wendell also had his moments of negativity. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he also had his moments of big moves, and Amber didn't have either of those in her season. So.
Yeah, it was a real shame in Winners at War we didn't get to see Amber evolve her strategy, or if this still is her strategy, like who she would have latched onto if it wasn't Rob. I feel it's a real shame that she got voted out so early. Like if Rob wasn't on the season, which of course they never would have done, but if Rob wasn't on the season, how far would have Amber have made it? Could Amber have made it to the final 3? Could have Amber made it to fire making, I guess, at this point? That's really the question.
Yeah.
I feel like it's possible. If Rob's not there, Amber's viewed as like an afterthought.
Yeah, there's no reason to vote her out.
No.
At all. Yeah, so I mean that's it. I think that pretty much covers these 4 seasons, unless there's anything that we didn't cover, like unless there's anything we didn't say. But I feel like we hit all the topics for all 4 seasons. Talked about
we didn't talk about Boston Rob telling Lex that he tried to keep him, but he can't.
Oh my God! Well, that's also, but again, that's not really Amber's move. That's just the reason that Amber gets Lex's vote at the end because.
But that's that one vote. I mean, she wins by 1 vote. It's like every vote counts. Like, how does each vote happen? It's not a 6-1 blowout like Sandra or Jenna.
Absolutely. So, but anyway, so that's episode 2. We're going to be doing episode 3 again next Monday. We'll be doing all these episodes
for sure
on Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Next week is going to be Chris Doherty, Tom Westman, Danny Boatwright, and Aris Bauskakis. I have no idea how to say that.
That's a lineup.
That's a great line, though. Much easier to talk about lineup, I feel, because all of their wins were a lot more focal,
obvious,
which is good. Yes, it's something that we could all actually see, with the exception of Danny, but that one's a fun one to talk about. Anyway, Alexa, give us the update on what we're doing and where they can find Wes.
There. Oh, that way.
They can find him down there.
I can't tell you where you find me.
So you can follow us on Twitter at upon_island, but as he mentioned before, you can just Google Once Upon an Island and you will be able to find his YouTube channel. You have an Instagram as well, I believe. Yep. Your Twitter. So check him out. He's got some really great stuff. He has a video about the attack zone, and if you guys are confused about what the attack zone is, go there. It's the best challenge.
I have a video on Brian Heidick, and this week I start doing videos on the Amazon. Like this Friday, Amazon videos start coming. So hope you guys better be ready.
You guys thought you could go you thought you could go an episode without hearing that song. Phil, should I say anything else or not?
I think you should.
Yes.
I mean tomorrow for sure, and then I think we got to do our trivia
because we're like I don't know. So for those of you who
that's true. But yeah, do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it because I want to promote.
Say tomorrow, June.
Yeah, so because
Tomorrow,
this
June
is
9th.
obviously going to become a very important podcast for the decades to come. For those of you who are listening on June 8th of the year 2020, tomorrow, June 9th, 2020, we are not done with our Survivor Winners at War interviews. We are talking to Ethan Zahn of Survivor Africa, Survivor All-Stars, and Survivor Winners at War. We would not have gotten him if it weren't for Wes. So thank you so much for putting us in contact with him. We are incredibly excited to talk to him. Ethan is from Phil. I'm so sensitive to saying that because I now realize I say that for every single time I promote somebody.
You do. Super
so
excited.
I need to come up with a new way to say
Alexa's always super excited. She's just living.
I'm constantly super excited. Ethan is from the town next to where I grew up, so very excited to talk to him about that, about suburban life. But make sure to tune in for that. It's going to be on at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're really, really just thrilled to speak with him. How about that? So again, Wes, thank you so much for setting us up with him.
Sure,
He's wonderful. It's going to be a really good time. So make sure to tune in.
I'm gonna hit the end broadcast. Alexa, you left me in the dark there. Is it 7 or 6 before we end?
It's 7. Were you listening?